Chapter 141, Greenhouse. Looking up from the valley where Cheryl was located, the sun was peeking over the clouds. The mountains around reached up to the skies, and it was these mountainous ridges that created this rare warm granary of the northern lands. The bizarre and mystical workings of nature had created this land of miracles. The mountainous ridges and forests had blocked off the cold drafts, while the rain, dews, and underground streams gave life to the ground. As a result, this unique granary of the northern lands was created. The northern lands weren't suited for growing crops. At maximum, its lands could only enjoy a harvest once a year, whereas in this valley, with the assistance of a spellcaster, it could enjoy a maximum of 3 harvests per year. Furthermore, due to the rich nutrients in the ground and the suitable weather, the quality of the harvest was rather high. This was also the reason why we had to come here. 10 years of work on some other land would mean around 10 generations of crops to choose from, whereas in the same period of time, 30 generations of crops could grow here. There was a huge difference between each generation in crossbreeding crops, let alone 20 generations. Can't we just use magic to hasten their growth? I really have no idea how you managed to pass the theoretical life examinations back then. Normal crops and crops whose growth have been hastened by magic are actually 2 totally different things. Crops hastened by magic carry with them the spellcaster's will, which warps the crop's growth. If we want to see the normal growing process of life, we have to do it step by step. Are you sure you really don't know how he passed the examinations? It was all cheating. Back then, if not for his outstanding cheating skills, given that non-existent elemental comprehension ability of his, he would have long ago failed most of his homework and exams, resulting in his expulsion. After waking from her long slumber, Harlois possessed a state of vigorous energy. At this moment, she was talking bad about me while crouching on my head and tugging on my hair to make fur balls. Teacher Harlois, your habits. Could it be that your physical form affects your soul? That reminder caused the darned cat to freeze. Only at this instant did she realize that her actions were no different from a real cat. She immediately covered her face and went into silent depression. Pooh! How is that possible? That cat form of hers is just one of her mimicries. She is just addicted to playing the role of a cat. Darned cat, how dare you bite me? Alright, the moment I used my physical actions to display what disaster originates from one's mouth meant, Harlois also used her physical actions to display what embarrassment warping into anger meant. A pet cat attacking its owner? Are you rebelling, you meow alien? You all have not conquered the world yet. After which, I got into a fight with that darned cat. Just when I was about to achieve victory due to the advantage of my physique, I heard Amelia's faint words. Seems like your relationship is pretty good. Who would have a good relationship with him, her? Alright. At the very least, our opinion in this aspect was aligned. In order to prove so, as well as to verify Harlois's testimony, I grabbed the cat by her neck and did an 18 hell rotation and received a pleasurable, shrill scream and a dizzy-headed darned cat in return. Compared to before, the movements of the awakened darned cat were much more like a real cat. As for the outer appearance, she seemed to have grown from a meow alien youngling into an adult black cat, and her stiff cat fur had become glossy and smooth. After successfully absorbing the semi-god equipment, the dark god's breath of death, Harlois finally began to display her potential as a top-notch magic pet. On the surface, she became much more elegant, while beneath the surface, a much greater change had occurred. Magic pet, Harlois, main body of greed race, slime strength, 14 agility, 10 stamina, 35 intelligence, 30 will, 25 charm, depends job, 37 Latvian Lati mage overview, position, racial ability, transmogrification, legendary, child of greed division, legendary, innate ability, transmogrification, legendary, transforming to a harmless kitten is just its weakest ability. It can choose to change to weapon form, and the current choices are staff, breath of death, and magic sword, counterfeit, pale justice. Innate ability, child of greed division, legendary, divides to form a small child of greed. The child of greed will inherit a portion of Harlois's abilities and stats. As long as the child of greed is within a certain radius around Harlois, it will be under her total control, serving as her eyes, ears, hands, and legs. The total amount of divisions, 15,417, Before misfortune strikes, one would somehow find the inauspicious omen of a black cat roaming about, and for Harlois, being everywhere isn't a difficult task. She always arrives in time in the form of a crow, black cat to laugh at your misfortune. System evaluation: this is your magic pet, but she is constantly thinking of how to get rid of you within the limitations of the contract. Do not be fooled by her outer appearance. As a grandmaster in magic, even though she only possesses the strength of a bronze rank at the moment, she is able to easily destroy those gold rank rookies. Furthermore, her incredible base stats and her transmogrification ability has made her even more dangerous than before. System evaluation 2: she definitely isn't as weak as she portrays herself. As for why she hides her strength, is there a need for me to explain it to you? Perhaps the recent interaction with you has pleased her, so she decided to leave a path for you after a successful revolt. So what are you still waiting for? Hurry up and get rid of this foolish meow alien while you still have the upper hand. The tier of the Breath of Death staff had been lowered to epic rank, and the consumed power of death had allowed Harlois to become powerful and dangerous. Looking at the various figures on the interface and the increasing numbers of Child of Greed, I started to suspect whether I would be a match for her if I really fell out and had to exchange blows with her. To tell the truth, the current situation of the cat thinking that she had concealed her strength well when it was all laid bare, out in the open, was enjoyable for me, given how I could bully this darned cat openly. Furthermore, in order to make me neglect her fighting power, she could only record the scores one by one. Harlois's experience and wisdom were what I most valued about her, and she had helped choose the first batch of crops to plant. Naturally, due to the complete lack of decency and common sense between Amelia and me, we needed her to correct us. I have a good idea. Why don't we plant rice on the back of frogs, which have moist skin? We can create a hybrid animal plant. I even came up with a name for it. I choose you. Wonder Frog Seed. Rejected. Putting aside the technological aspects, the frog would probably die in a few days. Furthermore, how can something like this reproduce? Then, why don't we plant it on zombies? It is said that the decomposing bodies of the undead serve as good fertilizer for plants. Rejected. Who would dare to eat rice planted on a zombie? Then, if you dare to say zombie wheat or zombie biscuit, I will smear your entire face with slime goo. Fine, I'll return and give it some more thought. Should I say, as expected of a professional? Initially, I thought that Amelia would be like me, coming up with interesting projects to try as well as experimenting with the newest technology. In the end, she decided to settle the matter seriously. Special breed Hewitt barley and Sierra rice. Is that enough? Yeah. We will just use 17 genetically modified plants for the first batch. We have to find the most suitable genes for cold and dry conditions. After finding the most suitable breed, I will use my magic to modify it once again and use the ones that were modified the best for the second batch. Obtaining good crops through genetic modification isn't something that will bear results within the short run. Even if you provide me with this greenhouse technology of yours, at the very most, it can only hasten the process in awaiting the germination and growth of the plants. For the safety of the population, we have to proceed prudently. Why are you all staring at me like that? Did I say something wrong? I hurriedly shook my head. There's nothing wrong with your words, but this seemed a little off with your image. One should face Mother Earth with gratitude for the blessings she has showered upon us, and appreciate her gifts. Back then, when I was the sacred maiden of the Church of Mother Earth and Zintharar, my teacher taught me so. A pity. Sacred maiden? Furthermore, the sacred maiden of the Church of Mother Earth that had an incredibly good reputation? I couldn't help but be impressed by how colorful Amelia's life was, as well as curious as to how she managed to come to such a point. A pity? It is a pity that she was duped by a man. As a sacred maiden who lost her purity, she was expelled from the church. Furthermore, that man even abandoned her, saying that I was only playing with you. After all, men always bear some level of interest for sacred maidens, but you aren't a sacred maiden anymore. Why should I give up my honor to accompany you for life? Not long later, my teacher committed suicide. Due to her dishonorable death, she was regarded as a stain on the Church of Mother Earth's history. In fact, even I, her successor as the next sacred maiden and her adopted daughter, was unable to attend her funeral. She truly lost her standing and reputation. Her calm and casual words carried an undercurrent of bone-chilling hatred. You avenged her? I killed that man's entire family, but he managed to escape. To date, I am still unable to do anything about him. To date, he is still alive? Dragon Hunter Deimos. He is the first generation Deimos. I have already killed the second generation Deimos, and one day, I will. This wasn't the first time I had heard this name. Didn't Marcelet's enemy go by such a name as well? Remembering the intelligence I had gotten from that old Emperor of Alland, I smiled. Bury his bones amidst undying grass and cut off a portion of his flesh every day to feed to him. She had already begun to talk about the torture scenarios she had come up with. The more she spoke, the more agitated she got. It was clear from her red eyes that she was on the verge of losing control once more. At this moment, I patted her shoulders. One day, you will have your revenge. I will help you. I will make him die in greater dishonor and despair than your mother. Amelia froze for a moment before taking 2 steps away from me. She stared at me warily. Don't try to act intimate with me. You aren't any better than him. I know your history well. Even though you don't have any confirmed relationships with the opposite gender and there aren't any cases of you toying with their feelings, the number of women you messed with and the emotional debt that you owe them is much greater than that bastard. My jaw dropped. Where did this rumor come from? I have been a virgin for 3 generations now, and if I really owed that much emotional debt, I would have just made up for it to shake off my single identity. I don't have any. HMPH, don't bother trying to convince me otherwise. You playboys are skilled in planting expectations into women. Can you remember the number of women who have cried over you? Right now, we're only working partners, so don't even dream about gaining my trust once more. Staring at the figure of Amelia, who turned to leave right after she was done saying her piece, I couldn't find a response. Playboy, playboy. This virgin is actually treated as a playboy. Pooh. I can't stop laughing. This darned cat actually started rolling all over my head in laughter, inducing in me the urge to throw her. Yeah, the next moment, I did it. Even when flying in the air, she was still shouting. So dizzy. You are really annoying. I will be back. HMPH, what is truly disgusting is a meow alien who can talk. Turning around, I saw a bunch of fawning faces. Lord, can we take a rest? It is almost noon now. No, continue working. This is punishment. Naturally, for the crops experiment, we required diligent farmers toiling in the fields. The farmers whose entire bodies were covered with mud at this moment, after working for an entire morning, were the group who were about to be promoted as the bosses of different departments. Eagle Storm, I am very thankful for your support. However, you can't behave like this just because you are unable to find any students. After hearing those words, the legend rank druid's face flushed. Yesterday, after they were unable to recruit a single student no matter how hard they tried, they used a certain someone's idea and began to morph into bears, wolves, and other animals. They carried the children around to win their good fault will. However, by the impetus of some inconceivable primitive will, the unique culture of Luwang Mountain City started to show on the surface. Mom, what's that? A bird? Your head that it is a bird. It is obviously an elephant. Ah, let's go, don't look. Xuidi, I heard someone call the Church of Law the Church of Nude Running yesterday. Boss, leave it all to me. I will show you the innate talent Taurans have in farming. One of my race talents is in herbology. I can't understand why Taurans require this race talent, but perhaps, it was in preparation of this day. Oh, I'm burning up. I will work hard. After being hung to make beef jerky, this fellow managed to keep himself in check for 2 days. However, after going through forests to come to this valley, his passion had been ignited once more. When he caught sight of the familiar wave of nude runners, how could he contain his urge? As for Clint and the other goblins, I should have stopped them the instant they started to demonstrate their abilities in assembling machinery. In the end, someone even had to fill up those craters by the mines. As for Bai Ifeng, right, what did Bai Ifeng do? Why is he being punished? Bai Ifeng, what did you do that day? Lord, I was framed. Back then, I was only chatting with someone. But somehow everyone just pulled me here. Bai Ifeng, you didn't commit any mistakes? I'm sorry, it's a habit. Somehow, I just pulled you here upon catching sight of you. Alright, I will deduct one from your future exploits then. Diana's apology had not an ounce of sincerity. Even so, the deduction of one punishment was accepted by the crowds. Apparently, everyone thought that Bai Feng would commit more crimes. Impossible. Bai Feng actually didn't make any mistakes? Bullshit. We must have just overlooked it. How can it be possible for him to not do anything at all? Sigh. The world slanders me, deceives me, insults me, mocks me, belittles me, debases me, loathes me, and scams me. So what? I need only tolerate it, allow it, permit it, avoid it, bear it, respect it, ignore it, and, after a few years, look at it again. Eventually, under the criticism of the crowd, the innocent Rook inside, spouted a few words that tempted others to pummel him before working diligently alongside Xuidi. Chapter 142, Ominous Clouds and Changes for Menial Labor, Household Chores, Construction, and even dangerous mining jobs. There's nothing that it can't do. What can be more suitable and trustworthy than an indefatigable zombie worker as your assistant? Not only do they not need rest, they also don't need a wage. It only costs 10 gold coins for one, and you only need to pay 2 gold coins every year to charge up the power of death in it. You will benefit your entire life with this purchase. Don't listen to the nonsense of that fellow. Zombies easily become smelly. It might still be acceptable in winter, but when spring and summer come, that stench will stink you to death. Hey, uncle, why don't you take a look at my mummy made? Not only will it never rot, its insides are filled with top-notch fragrant spices that give you an aromatic scent even when you hug it to sleep at night. You should know that only those of noble standing can be mummified after their death. This cutie of mine used to be a noble princess before her departure. He is just spouting bullshit. Do you think that he would dare to dig the graves of royalty given his appearance? That is most probably just a normal female villager with fat thighs. A goblin princess should still be considered a princess. Furthermore, she is the princess of a massive tribe with a population exceeding 300. Even when the battle between these two necromancers quickly elevated from a verbal one to a physical one, not a single customer had the intention of patronizing their stall. Instead, they chose the skeleton worker not too far away. That's because skeleton workers are cheap and hygienic. Furthermore, even when the power of death dissipated in them, they could be treated as a clothes hanger or be fed to the dogs. Undead war mounts for sale. It knows not of weariness and is eternally loyal. You have to think of your weight before riding on a skeleton horse which falls apart easily. I have a skeleton beast that can be used to pull carriages. Feel free to choose among a variety of them. This was Definder's 7th market as well as the newly established Undead Worker Trading Center. Necromancers had finally found their livelihood aside from slaughter in here. When the news of the Sinless City spread across the entire continent, the most delighted group was probably the necromancers. In this cruel world, the weak never fared well. Most people already had an instinctive desire to pursue strength, even if the strength was taboo. However, it could give them better lives, and at the very least, they wouldn't die ludicrously by being caught up in a fight. No matter what, it was a risk worth taking. By training step by step, not every single existence who practiced the depraved demonic arts would become demented. But the Holy Church didn't consider what the undead, whose existence is a sin, had done. They persisted in cleansing every single undead. Necromancers who were capable of creating them were absolute heretics they had to destroy. Some of them were coincidentally compatible with necromancy. Some of them fortuitously happened to inherit it. Even so, it mattered not. When their true identities were revealed, they were still outlawed in the same way as heretics and villains. Such prejudice made every single necromancer go all out to conceal their existence. If they were revealed, they might even resort to silencing the witnesses directly. In another sense, it caused them to fall into a deeper nightmare. In the eyes of the world, it was impossible for necromancers to be the cheerful neighbor boy whose face was full of acne. Necromancers must have a gloomy face and savagery must be reflected in their eyes as they planned their vile schemes to destroy the world and the demented Zayuo Empire. The truth was that it was a misunderstanding. Zayuo was a country for the deceased. Their nobles and fief lords were all undead. On the other hand, no matter how bizarre necromancers were to the eyes of the world, they were still living beings, and in a certain sense, living beings were equivalent to slaves in Ziluo. This made the identities of the living necromancers in Ziluo awkward. Unless they were willing to give up on their physical body and convert into a lich, or if they possessed incredible talents that allowed them to become an apprentice of a lich, their lives would most likely be difficult there. At the very least, their sustenance, accommodation, and numerous other living conditions were not what they deserved. If a bloodthirsty member of the blood tribe was enticed by the scent of their blood, a bellicose death knight found a sudden urge to use them as his practice target, or perhaps their lich mentor wanted to use them as his new experimental subject. Actually, as long as they did not reveal their own magic, most necromancers were able to blend into the crowd. Furthermore, they were still able to use their own abilities to better their living conditions. All along, necromancers and warlocks were the favored mercenaries of the nobles. After all, they were figures who were unable to come to the surface, and they struck quickly and ruthlessly. Even if some secret were leaked to them accidentally, they were unlikely to spread it. As such, the reputation of the necromancers worsened. It didn't help that necromancers required corpses to improve their skills. They could only murder others personally or rob graves. This gave rise to numerous bizarre city sightings and ghost stories. As such, the graves of every city were under the surveillance of a watchman dispatched by the Church of Holy Light. It was natural to leave some traces behind in the midst of robbing corpses as well. Even if they reached silver rank or gold rank by sheer luck, allowing them to earn big bucks with their strength by serving as mercenaries, if they were to accidentally slip up, they would still be exposed. Even a beggar by the roadside might report you in the blink of an eye for the sake of 10 silver coins. The moment a necromancer was exposed, no matter how many good deeds one did in the past, the Church of Holy Light would instantly send their forces over to surround the necromancer. Even if one escaped from their encirclement, due to the worldwide arrest warrant, one could only wander around the world aimlessly to avoid pursuit. Less than 10% of these people were lucky enough to escape to a rural countryside village or Ziluo Empire. When Wu Mian's declaration resounded across the entire world, these hidden necromancers were taken aback. Uncontrollable, frenzied joy followed. Undead did not represent evil. Perhaps I'll be able to live with dignity from now on. Maybe I might even be respected and revered. As such, half a month after the declaration was made, numerous disguised necromancers entered the city before disappearing abruptly. There were even more of them who chose to sneak into the city by scaling the city walls. These days, there were always people trying to fly across the wall. Some of them were of the blood tribes. Some of them were gargoyles. Most of the time, a person would be hanging beneath them. Their appearances made the city guards wary as well as hesitant about whether they should shoot them down or not. Did they really have to shoot them down? However, something was obviously wrong. Soon, the guards understood what was going on, but why did those people avoid the city gates? Most of those who flew in, upon landing, would find themselves surrounded by knights. Are you a necromancer? No, I'm just a fanatic of extreme sports. Today, I saw a passing gargoyle and wanted to experience the sensation of flying in midair. Thus, I grabbed its legs and happened to fly in here. Even a fool wouldn't fall for these kinds of crappy lies. However, the ones speaking them never got sick of it. The Knight Order in charge of defending Defender eventually succumbed to these slippery necromancers. As a result, they pasted a notice on the city gates. Gate 7 of the city's west side will be specially allocated for the usage of necromancers. It will only take half an hour for the numerous administrative paperwork and identification verification. Furthermore, it comes with 3 job recommendations. Necromancers who enter the city through any other means will be fined 300 gold coins upon revelation, and stripped of their job permit for 2 months. Note: please station your gargoyles and all undead beings of middle scale and larger outside the city. Alternatively, you can pay a fee at Gate 7 for it to be kept there. Of course, you have the freedom to infringe the rules written above. However, Definder's airspace is guarded by Bone Dragon Rider Lord Tamir. You can try to play cat and mouse with him, but if he and his mount strike too heavily against you, your remains may become a popular auction item for your peers the next day. Presently, skeleton mages and undead sorcerers are expensive commodities in the city. This was already utmost sincerity on our part. At the very least, we didn't hunt them down, and instead, we expressed kind intentions to them. After someone led the way and confirmed the passage was safe, Even my undead knights were surprised by the number of necromancers entering. After entering the city, while rejoicing over finding so many comrades, a new problem appeared. Just when they were treading into a new life, they found themselves jobless. The newly established Defender Life Medical School, School of Necromancy, needed many lecturers and teachers, but that was for the elites. Most of the necromancers were self-taught and their standards were only slightly better than apprentices. Rather than teaching others, they wanted to find a teacher to guide them along. Doing what we did previously? Did you mean an assassin or a mercenary? There were quite a few bloodthirsty ones among the necromancers, so they naturally thought of resorting to how they made a living in the past. I had to admit that there was no lower limit to the foolishness of the humans. They actually dared to commit such severe crimes in the Sinless City, a phenomenon created by the god of law. When their corpses were hanged on flagpoles to be dried, it served as a warning to the others, and explained the judgment spell and Sinless City. Even so, the mass unemployment would eventually lead to social instability. As a result, I had already made preparations for it in advance. The first solution was joining the army. After all, necromancers were powerful weapons in war. This was where their expertise lay. My army had many years of experience and were well versed in effectively utilizing necromancers in battle. However, there were also weaker necromancers who were unwilling to step onto the battlefield. This was another area that I had to look into. Bringing in all kinds of magic into our daily lives, converting the products of necromancy into tools for the convenience of daily living? This subject seemed to be an absurd and impossible one, but it was by no means a new one. Many human kingdoms had already started to use magic lamps, and magic kettles were a daily necessity for nobles. The numerous products of alchemy also came from the crystallization of the wisdom of the magic civilization. Since it was already proven probable with other magic and alchemy, why should it be impossible for necromancy? In reality, necromancy was all-encompassing, though the materials required for it were slightly unique. The main job of the summoned undead was serving the necromancer who summoned them. It was within my expectations that a labor market would be started. Of course, there were technical difficulties to it as well. The instinct of low-tier undead had determined them unintelligent and bloodthirsty. Unless the necromancers kept a close watch on them, no one could guarantee that these brainless undead would not go out of control. However, an invention had changed all that. Sloth Sword Seal. Death is the sweetest slumber. However, it is a pity that it isn't time for you leave work yet. So make good use of your time and continue living an exciting life. The Sloth Sword Seal was a sword seal that represented all products of necromancy. Its use wasn't any different from the other elemental sword seals. It was activated through Olivia's magic box. Through the sword seal, one could manipulate the power of death. However, based on the current level of research, it could only allow its user to control a few low-tier undead. I left certain concepts and theories to Olivia and company for them to develop into sword seals. Soon enough, a new Olivia's magic box customized for undead usage was created. Its only use was allowing one to control a low-tier undead through contracts. Thus, when ordinary humans wielded this black magic core, they were able to control their low-tier undead through it and get them to work for them. As a result, the undead labor market became a reality. Skeletons did household chores, zombies mined minerals, and mummies served as maids. Only the people's imagination stopped them. Anything could be realized. Of course, there was a limit to everything. The genius who thought of the concept of a cute and disgusting abomination by complementing it with a sexy maid costume had been stripped of his job permit for 3 months due to excessive complaints about how the product blinded people's sight. On the other hand, Phantom Carriage Rental, The Gargoyle Express, and the Zombies vs. Plants series became the talk of the town. As predicted, with technology nearing perfection, perhaps an entirely new magic civilization would be born. Maybe these little things seemed like nothing, but they had huge repercussions on the future. The unknown had always brought fear to humans. However, when these beings were willing to be enslaved, the fear and sense of estrangement was hugely minimized. Eventually, when these became acceptable to the world, necromancers would be able to enjoy normal lives. Sometimes, the air treads somewhere unfathomable to you. Perhaps even the inventor, Prince Roland, did not expect that this obscure and unaccepted invention would be the impetus to effect change on the world. However, some things would never change. For example, the unpredictable minds of sentient beings and the seeds of resentment. Looking at the headless corpse, Rand sighed. The two corpses were extremely young. One of them was a silver-ranked demi-elf hunter, whereas the other was a rookie necromancer who had managed to sneak in. When she was patrolling the city walls, they, disguised as passers-by, suddenly assaulted her. However, in the next instant, her guards had already decapitated them. Master Fade, Teacher Ferdinand, and Teacher Sina, thank you for protecting me. You all have worked hard. There's no need to thank us. This was Prince Roland's order. Before leaving, I had the two sword saints and great mage protect Tren. Back then, Rand thought I was overreacting, but facts had proved my judgment correct. This was already the 7th assassination attempt this month, and it was clear that this was only the start. The younger the seedling, the easier it is crushed. Even if we put aside your identity as the descendant of the mist, just by the fact that you are the knot tying East Mist communal country and me together, you are absolutely important and irreplaceable to the country in its current state. If something happened to you, everything would fall apart. If I were the enemy of East Mist, assassinating you would be the best way for the country to fall into disarray. We should have no enemies in the northern lands, right? Back then, I only chuckled, not pointing anything out. At this moment, Ren remembered her indifference back then and could only lament her ignorance and immaturity. Send them over to the 7th Market and submit a report of the soul interrogations to me, even though it is highly likely that they were sent by the kingdom once more. Seriously, the beastmen are going to be invading the northern lands next year. Instead of diverting their attention towards assassinating me, they should be reorganizing their army and making preparations for battle. No enemies? They were probably all enemies. On a state level, as long as there were conflict of interests, it was impossible for two countries to have an amicable relationship. No one would want to have a powerful neighbor, even if the country repeatedly claimed that they would not invade the other countries. How would it be possible for them to entrust their safety in the words of others? Furthermore, these countries also had ambitions of their own, and the newly rising East Mist was an eyesore for their plans. I, who was a Cheryl, also met with similar experiences. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top-notch assassins, not to mention a Saint Trank hidden in the shadows. They sure do view me highly. Beside me, Amelia shook her staff with a furious expression. Yet another group trying to assassinate you. This is the 13th time this week. I have almost been reduced to a free bodyguard for you. Compensate me. HMPH, I have no money for you. My life isn't for your taking either. Winter often came earlier for the Highlands. When most of the countries of the northern lands were preparing for the invasion of the Beastmen next year, when spring came, the lands of the Beastmen were already shrouded in ice and snow. However, as usual, the Beastmen had no intention of shrinking their area of activity to prepare to tide through the winter. On the contrary, the Wolf Knights and Lightning Rock Knights were traversing across the highlands to hunt down hidden human spies. The closer one got to the base camp of the Beastmen, the more frequent these patrols passed by. Such abnormal behavior attracted the attention of the various countries, but even after they paid a heavy price to infiltrate the Beastmen's camp and listen in on their discussions, all they got was that the Beastmen were preparing resources for war. In reality, that was only a smokescreen. There were only two conventional, narrow paths down the highlands where the Beastmen resided, and both paths were blocked by the fortress cities of two different countries. The entrance leading to the various human countries of the northern lands was a barren and remote land called Erol Highlands. At this very moment, smoke was billowing ceaselessly from the innumerable tents established on that plot of land, indicating the presence of the Beastmen army. The chieftains were currently gathered at the highest peak of Erol Highlands. At this moment, news that made their tribesmen thrilled was currently spreading amid the tents. Let's toast to the glory of the war god. By next week, our Beastmen army will be able to begin its invasion. Finally, we can settle our old scores. This time, let's catch the humans off guard. Activate Plan Thunderbird. Chapter 143, Short Letter A swordsman of Zhou wears a plain helmet, his curved blade bright as rime. Wearing shabby leather armor made of python skin, a swordsman of the northern lands wielded a silver longsword and created snow white after images in the air. Wherever the radiant longsword struck, A bone-chilling wind issued, even covering the ground in a layer of thin frost. A silver saddle shines on a white horse, galloping swift as a shooting star. Pointing the longsword to the heavens, a silver-winged horse galloped over. Carrying the knight, the apparitional mount charged forward as if a silver shooting star. Robbing a life every 10 steps, never turning back in the long journey. Wherever the sword passed, the heads of the enemies flew. Just with a sharp sword in his hands and the mount beneath him, the lightly dressed knight could tread dominantly across the northern lands, flicking his sleeves when all's done, casting his reputation into the shadows. I seem to have forgotten what comes afterwards. Forget it, I am unable to conceal my reputation anyway. Boys, pay close attention. I, Roland Mist, have come. I am the Lich King. When Pale Justice was abruptly stabbed in the ground, magic gathered and the black tortoise sword seal, represented by an amalgamation of tortoise and snake, activated. A snowflake formation lighted up on the ground, and as the hidden, frigid current beneath the ground burst outward, ice magic froze everything in the surroundings. My actions were too sudden. Along with the creeping of ice, the feet of the assassin in the shadows were frozen, rooted to the spot before he could even react. If he could react swiftly, he could amputate his leg and escape. If he were slow, he would enjoy the luxury of being encased in ice. I am truly impressed with those protagonists of novels. They always manage to look dashing when reciting poems in the midst of battle, but in actuality, it isn't something plausible for a human to do. How did they manage to chant magic incantations, contemplate fighting strategies, and adjust the rhythm of battle while recalling the poems at the same time? Aren't they worried about forgetting a phrase and ending up being embarrassed? What if they happen to choke on air and cough uncontrollably? Wouldn't their deaths end up ridiculous? While I was retorting, a snake-shaped dagger with a green gleam on it suddenly appeared in the shadows behind me. That menacing dagger slowly moved towards the nape of my neck without the slightest movement of wind. Just as the blade was about to come into contact with me, the body of the assassin who wore a cruel smile suddenly jolted. An upgraded ability of Shadow Step, temporary elemental concealment. This seems to be a rare ability that only a master assassin with elemental bloodline can learn. What a wonderful experimental subject. How could it possible for the veteran assassin to slip up at such a crucial moment? However, his hands were already numbed. Ah! Pale Justice was just inserted into the ground, but a rampaging flash of lightning was crackling as though thunder was traversing through the sword. The frenzied flow of lightning caused the unfortunate assassin's body to convulse ceaselessly. Pitiful child. I doubt you can understand why a magic sword which had no contact with its wielder was able to attack you. I should remember this skill and teach those rookies when I get back so that they can use it on others. The lightning from the Azure Dragon's sword seal that I activated wasn't too strong. The assassin whose body was convulsing was still able to grit his teeth and climb up. He had intended to bring me down along with him, but I simply patted the black cat on my shoulder. Gather a blood sample so that we can run an analysis on it. He is a rare specimen, so keep him alive. We'll extract his soul when we're back at the experimental lab. Upon hearing these words, the elegant cat lowered her head and licked her paws, not moving from her spot whatsoever. I knew that she was just waiting to negotiate the terms with me. I will split a third of it with you. If Senior doesn't want it, I will split half of it with you then. You lunatic. To think that our Phantom Serpent bandits were destroyed by you lunatics, a person who talked to his cat. Ah! Upon seeing that I still facing the other way, the furious assassin dashed forward to assault me. However, in the next instant, an ominous black shadow blanketed his vision. Cat demon. A queer smile crept onto the corners of the lips of the cat-shaped figure on top of the assassin's head, as though it was mocking something or someone. The assassin could no longer suppress the fear which penetrated straight into his bones. He immediately turned and ran. However, in a flash of light and a piercing scream, the assassin disappeared without a trace. All that was left on the spot was the elegant cat who was still tidying up its face. With a snap of a finger, the 3 corpses of the 3 bandits who had died from excessive bleeding stood up silently. They would bring the other frozen bodies with them. With necromancy no longer outlawed, the corpses of experts have become valuable trading commodities for the nobility. Naturally, we can't waste such precious goods. While I was still admiring my actions, the battle on the other side had also reached its final moments. A black, Man-eating flower was chewing on something. Taking a closer look, it was the right arm of that saint-rank assassin nicknamed Hellfire. After sacrificing his own limbs to feed those frenzied plants, the great assassin Hellfire finally got into proximity to the mage. However, what met the cruel smile of the assassin wasn't a panicking rookie mage, but an insane demoness who grinned even more happily. "You're the 76th assassin who thought that I was an idiot at close combat. How do you think your predecessors fared?" The will of a saint-rank assassin was unfaltering. Even though he vaguely felt that something was amiss, the words of the other party was unable to affect his mind. He immediately stopped on the spot and executed his movement technique, creating a series of mirror images that surrounded Amelia on all sides. However, all the female mage did was take a deep breath and drop her flamboyant sapphire staff. Ignoring all of the mirror images around her, she sent a punch towards her rear. Boom! Amelia wasn't as weak as she seemed on the surface. Just the wind pressure from the fearsomely forceful punch created a deep gash in the ground. Even though Hellfire reacted in time, he was still hit by it. He instantly kneeled on the ground and threw up blood. Pa! Wearing the ruby bracelet, Amelia flung her hand lightly. Accompanied by a shout of agony, a massive crater formed around him. Hellfire was lodged into granite. At this moment, all of the air within his body was forced out of him. Perhaps a bystander might think this some kind of gravity magic. However, I knew that this was just a simple swing of her hands, and what had pushed the assassin into the ground was just the wind pressure generated by her palm. You really can't offend a mage with 42 points in strength. Even more so, a genetically modified human whose eyes have the ability of true sight cannot be offended. After all, she had to possess an incredible amount of strength for her to still be alive after messing around so much. At this moment, Amelia stroked her hair and her peculiar silver irises hid their radiance. Her lips were moving, as though she was muttering something. Long, light green hair fluttered along with the wind. A young lady recited a poem. Just by her outward appearance, Amelia carried the aura of an academic. However, I couldn't be fooled because I could tell what the other party was speaking through lip reading. "Darling, it's time to eat. It's a feast this time." The next moment, the smooth, light green hair came to life. Her countless strands of hair extended with the tug of the wind before transforming into blood-red thorns. After the tip of those thorns opened a massive dragon-like mouth, when the assassin who was being chewed on was screaming in agony, I knew that the remaining images were rated mature 18+. Temperance. Huh? Truly a monster with a lack of any sort of temperance. Perhaps the reason why she named it temperance was so that this monster wouldn't eat too much and affect her figure. Senior's research direction was similar to mine. The information and results of our research could be traded, but the method which it showcased itself was completely different. In a certain sense, I was integrating biology, modern medical studies, and necromancy for my undead creation. Naturally, what I was creating were other powerful undead. On the other hand, as a master of biology, what Amelia studied was life itself. How could she possibly give up on the physical body that she was the most familiar with and understood the most, her own? It was likely that she was unable to remember how many times she had modified her body. Even when I first met her, she had already said that she was more like a plant than an animal. In fact, 2 of her 7 benevolent virtues, abstinence and diligence, were part of her body, plants that shared life with her. Their existence and growth made Amelia stronger. Amelia's combined total of 42 strength after enhancement by her equipment was something that had already exceeded the limits of ordinary life forms. I had never heard of a single race that had strength exceeding 40. Perhaps even the Titans couldn't match up to her. Her bloodline was already something that was unable to be evaluated. From her very core, she was a being that exceeded common sense. Of course, given how her ability to cause trouble was in no way inferior to mine, it was impossible for her to live until now without capabilities of her own. As far as I knew, her regenerative abilities and unkillable qualities were in no way inferior to mine. After that group of assassins had been completely cleaned away, I felt a little regretful. I wasn't in the midst of completing a mission now, and the saint-rank assassin which Senior killed didn't allocate me any fate points at all. "Why are you looking at me like that? I am lacking high-quality fertilizers at the moment. Even if you begged me, I wouldn't share any of it with you." Her guarded gaze was really depressing. Ever since that unpleasant chat back then, Amelia seemed to be even more on guard against me. Later, I will pass you a third of the blood and flesh of an elemental descendant possessing the ability of temporary elemental concealment. However, I will keep the soul and skeleton of that fellow. I have some uses for it. Such rare material. Your luck sure is good for you to always meet these kinds of unique existences. However, you seem to lose out in this deal. Are you scheming something? That wary gaze sure did break my heart. I shook my head. I knew that if I didn't provide some reason, she, who was already agitated, wouldn't feel at ease. Speaking of which, making that incredible senior of mine so wary, should I be proud of it? Since someone wants our head, we must naturally repay the favor. However, my strength is lacking at the moment, so senior, help me. It's a small matter. There is always a lack of fertilizer and experimental subjects. Deal. By this time, having received news of an assassination attempt on me, Xuiti and the others had rushed to the scene. However, upon realizing that there wasn't anywhere for them to interfere in, they became onlookers. Exactly which side is the antagonist? Why do I get a feeling that our side is the evil boss who intends to destroy the world, whereas the ones facing us are courageous heroes challenging the evil? Agreed. Seconded. Alright, upon hearing the discussion of the late rescue army, I was taken aback for a moment before chuckling. Looks like the days of living together with old friends like Amelia and Harlois has made me younger and livelier. However, this doesn't seem to be a bad thing. Of course, to my enemies, it was bad news. After enjoying such a long, peaceful life in Luhuang Mountain City, I had clearly toned down. Perhaps this was something good for those around me. However, considering the cruel future we were about to face, a scheming Yang who utilized everything in his grasp to achieve his means was clearly much more effective than a righteous holy knight. I had also never intended to sit still as doomsday befell us. Wish to destroy an evil and cunning opponent? Then, you have to become even more unscrupulous and frenzied than him. To my opponents, a scheming, lunatic avenger who was willing to cut away his limbs at crucial times posed the greatest threat. Also, I wasn't a moral ablutomaniac who was reluctant to dirty his own hands. Senior, Harlois and I. This is perhaps the most interesting, dangerous, frenzied, group of researchers in the entire world. Maybe we can create something interesting together. It was the annual hunting festival once more. The beastmen tribes were gathered around the Orizon mountainous range. Upon receiving the support of the earth elemental god Imritalorgan, the Blood Axe tribe had become the most powerful tribe of the lot. Its leader, Iran Blood Ox, had become the great chieftain of the new alliance of the tribes. Perhaps a familiar title might be much more appropriate for him, Beastman Sovereign. However, for him to don this crown stably upon his head, he had to win the upcoming war first. At this moment, the chieftains from the various tribes were discussing their future military plans. Rather, arguing would be a much better phrase. I object. The first snowfall is just around the corner, and launching an offensive at this moment is suicidal. The centaurs around the mountainous region were usually slightly slimmer and agiler than their brethren living in the underground world and the elven kingdoms. However, the chieftain of Kairsea tribe, Hair, was an exception. With a height of 3 meters, he wore a massive halberd on his back. He was well known for his unparalleled brute strength among the Highlands beastmen. I object to it as well. Sloweaver Kingdom and Karsumt Communal Country have fortresses blocking the entrances to the Highlands. By attacking them in winter, we would suffer overwhelming and additional losses. I don't fear sacrifice, and I understand that war demands sacrifice. However, I am unwilling to have my sisters become meaningless pawns of war. Kamala was the chieftain of the blue-feathered harpy shamanic tribe, as well as the most famous witch in the Highlands. She held in high esteem across the entire mountainous range, and her opinion was acknowledged by many other chieftains. Forcefully invading a well-defended human fortress in winter wasn't a good idea, no matter how one looked at it. The Blood Axe tribe's obstinacy finally resulted in an outburst of resentment by the various chieftains. If this matter wasn't settled properly, the alliance would likely fall apart. The chieftain of the Blood Axe tribe, Iran Blood Ox, was a towering eagleman. Their tribe was known for their lightning eagle riders, but Iran himself wasn't that well known. On the contrary, those who knew him thought of his capabilities as merely average. At this moment, challenged by the various other chieftains, Iran only knew to scratch his head in frustration. unable to find an answer to their questions. It was clear that he was at his wits' end. "I'm returning." The chieftain of the Bearman tribe, Rand, was known to be reticent as well as stubborn. He would definitely bring his men back now that he had also spoken of it. Finally, after making up his mind, Euron decided to speak of his plan. However, before he could start talking, a hoarse voice echoed from beyond the doors. "Chieftains of the various tribes, allow me to introduce myself. I am Daimon Riley, the representative of your alliance army." The one who had entered inconspicuously was a short trapman. Their kind usually lived in the sewers of the cities. Even though they were known to be cunning and difficult to deal with, they were sidelined by the beastmen who valued strength. However, even though the tent was packed with experts, no one dared underestimate this short trapman. Other than the fact that he was able to silently enter this tent, his scales and the horn on his face reflected his identity. "A hellbreed? Are you of the demons or the devils?" There was also an entrance to the Chaos Abyss in the northern lands. Beastmen weren't strangers to the dwellers of the underworld. However, there wasn't a single sapient tribe that bore goodwill for these two races. "My identity matters not. What is important is that I can help you." With the assistance of the Earth Elemental God, the geographic obstruction your army faces isn't a problem from the very start. There is no need for you to besiege those two fortresses at all. Daimon walked to the map and casually pointed out a path. It was an inconceivable path crossing over numerous steep mountain ranges and cliffs, straight to the core of the human world. "As for the gelidity of winter, I bring you all good news. With the assistance of the will of the Chaos Abyss, the Inferno Marquis has promised to grant you all the blessings of flames, allowing you all to remain unhindered by the cold gale of winter." The various chieftains stared at one another, unable to fully grasp the situation. "Inferno Marquis?" "The Inferno dimension is a part of the Chaos Abyss, so that Marquis should be a demon lord." "I am slightly knowledgeable in demonology, but I have never heard of the great name of the lord." "Could she be a new demon lord who has emerged in the past few hundred years?" "Ha ha." Daimon laughed gleefully. "No wonder you haven't ever heard of the name of that lord." That lord had only returned to the Chaos Abyss last year and she was instantly promoted to the position of Demon Marquis. This bears testimony to her strength. Furthermore, she is granted the noble title of the Devourer, and it is precisely due to the fact that she has devoured the god power of the Fire Elemental God that she is able to grant you all the blessings of the flame. Upon hearing those words, the crowd was delighted. On the other hand, upon seeing that there was hope in accomplishing his mission, Daimon's gleeful grin widened. "Look, this is a keepsake from that lord." It was a silver-plated bronze ring, with flames circling the ring slowly like some sort of decorative pattern. "Lord Elisa, please grant me your blessings." The Hellbreed Dragon Daimon raised the magic ring up high and the strength of the demon started to creep forth, summoning the will of a superior existence through an artifact. "Who is the one summoning me? Who dares interrupt my beauty sleep?" So it was an ugly ratman. Die. The consequences of enraging a demon lord were severe, and it was even worse when a female demon lord was roused by a hideous man. In an instant, the flames of the demon shrouded the summoner. "Lord, please spare me, I am Ino." "Ah. All right." The words of an unfortunate fellow who had already been reduced to ashes didn't hold any power. Looking at the magic ring that fell to the ground, everyone was taken aback. What kind of show is playing? To think that the intermediary would be destroyed by the mastermind all of a sudden? How can the negotiations go on after that? They had heard that the demons were irrational and illogical, and they had just had the honor of witnessing it firsthand. However, what were they supposed to do next? Return to their tribes? Chieftain Vin, you are well known for being suave among the beastmen and your social skills are good. Why don't you try communicating with that Marquis? Instantaneously, the complexion of the werefox chieftain whom Euron had pointed out paled. The Ratman intermediary had died right in front of them. How could he possibly dare to step forth at such a point? However, the werefox weren't reputed as the sages of the beastmen for nothing. He immediately found a solution to the problem. "You have already heard as well. This Daimon here was sentenced to death for interrupting the Marquis's sleep. Thus, we just have to communicate with her after her nap." "Yeah? Regardless of the time difference between the Chaos Abyss and the surface, 8 hours should be safe." Alright, this was clearly an attempt to drag things out, but this conclusion was something everyone could accept. Thus, They heaved a sigh of relief. On the other hand, I, who was far away in another country, received a message from the silver ring on my hand. The beastmen intend to circumvent the geographic limitations of the highlands and directly assault Slough in the midst of winter? Ed note, an ablutomaniac, a word that technically doesn't exist, would describe a person with ablutomania, that is, obsession with bathing and washing. TL note, a swordsman of Zhou wears a plain helmet, his curved blade bright as rime. Song of the Cavalier. The poem was by Li Bei, an extremely famous poet in China. It has inspired many works afterwards, a noteworthy one being a novel called Ode to Gallantry by Jin Yuang, a famous wuxia writer. The poem is incredible in the sense that you can really picture the sight of an awe-inspiring swordsman slaughtering his enemies before flinging his sleeves and leaving gallantly. However, due to the limitations of my translation, I shall not embarrass myself by translating all of it. Ed, it's okay, starve. I helped you. Chapter 144, Chaotic Situation in a Blizzard. Before dawn, the dense congregation of the Beastmen army packed their items, donned their tattered plate mail, and began their journey. Massive behemoths used their footsteps to awaken the sleeping highlands. Amidst the drumbeats, wolf knights began traversing the darkness while the aerial units who had just returned from their hunt carried the heads of human spies with them. What that was just described was impossible. According to the original plan, the Beastmen army should have set off long ago. However, a small accident occurred. Scram! What I want is top quality cosmetics from Yadozvan. Do you think that you can fool me with these inferior products? Do you believe I won't burn your entire base camp? Lord, please don't be angry. This is the top quality elven spring water. It has the ability of restoring youth and vitality. It is definitely much better than those inferior man-made alchemy products. I don't care. If you want my assistance, you have to fulfill to my requests. The dimensional window leading to the Chaos Abyss closed and the flames on the magic ring dissipated. The will of the demon Marchioness had already retreated. Looking at the pile of ashes on the ground, which Camilla shook her head helplessly. She slowly placed the magic ring down and left the tent. Upon stepping out of the tent, she saw countless faces waiting outside. They were all influential figures from the various tribes. Their worried looks were reminiscent of examinees waiting for the release of their results. Based on the frowns on their faces, it seemed that most of them didn't hold out much hope in the results. When the witch lightly shook her head in response to the gazes of the various chieftains, she received a wave of helpless sighs. She is too difficult to deal with. The previous time, she said that the war songs of the Beastmen were too noisy, so she wanted us to find something more soothing. Thus, we found sparrow shaman singers and wandering poets for her. Even though the collaboration of the two had produced a piece of melodious soul song, that demon said it was a countryside folk song and they were off key. This infuriated the proud soul singers to the point they almost charged to the door leading to the Chaos Abyss to teach her a lesson. I had to expend great effort before managing to appease them. That is nothing. What that happened 2 days ago was even worse. She actually said that she wanted to eat the red jade fruit, a fruit unique to the west of the continent. When I told her that there was none of it here, she almost killed me. And that don't you all have dragon knights? You should be able to get them if you tire a few of them to death. At the very least, I didn't make you all buy a lychee. What the hell is lychee? More than 30 attendants have died waking her from her sleep. There is already a rumor going about that we are feeding a powerful ogre with our attendants. Alright, not mentioning how this affects the morale of the troops, the amount of food our army consumes every day isn't a small sum. Are we supposed to continue stalling the matter like this? Forget it. Even without the fire god's blessing, it shouldn't be a problem conducting a sudden attack and taking down 2 cities to tide us through the winter with the assistance of the earth elemental god. At the very least, it would be much better than idling here like this. Yesterday, another 30 tribes chose to depart from the alliance. Women were difficult to deal with, even more so for demonesses. In the past half a month, the chieftains had already had enough of the endless demands from Elisa. Beastmen had their own pride as well, and the movement to go on with the invasion without her was gaining momentum. As one of the few people who were able to converse with Marchioness Elisa, Kamala naturally became the middle woman for them. During this period of time, the other chieftains viewed her highly. However, as time passed, she became an outlet for the frustrations of both sides, causing resentment to accrue in her. We can't wait anymore. Who knows what she will come up with tomorrow? The first snow is rapidly approaching, and by then, it will be too late. Sigh. I'd already heard that the demon lords were fickle-minded and did everything based on their own interests. This time, I've had the honor of witnessing it firsthand. SHH, this is a Marquis-level demoness who conquered an entire dimension by herself. She is an existence equivalent to a true god, so it is understandable that she would be slightly haughty. She has an eternity before her to play with us, but we can't afford to go along with her. We can't wait any longer. Let's just throw in our chips tomorrow. While the Beastmen chieftains were getting frustrated and infuriated over the demon lord, they couldn't have possibly guessed that the difficult demon lord they were talking about was currently speaking impassionately with their greatest opponent. Furthermore, her tone wasn't the irritable and impatient one that she spoke to them with. They are probably getting impatient. Even without the fire god's blessing, they will probably go it alone. Stalling them for half a month? That's already quite an incredible feat. Is the pressure from the Chaos Abyss piling up? Are the other demon lords complaining about it? The demons wouldn't bother about such insignificant figures. It is the will of the Chaos Abyss to allow the power of elements to wreak havoc in the main dimension. It doesn't care about the Beastmen's success. It is sufficient as long as the power of elements causes the elemental tide to rise. At this point, Elisa paused. There seemed to be some other intentions behind this invasion. Most probably, there are intermediaries from other demon nobles in the camp. There are many great demons who intend to utilize this opportunity to please the will of the Chaos Abyss. As long as I continue to refuse to grant them the blessing, others will probably take my place. Just grant them it then. Grant them the blessings when they show all of their cards to you. Yeah? This was different from what we had discussed previously. A Beastman army who did not fear the cold would become a difficult enemy to fight against, but I had other ideas. It would be problematic for us to deal with them if they were granted the complete fire god's blessing. However, if something were to happen midway through and the blessing didn't possess the effects they had expected, no one would be able to blame you. You get it? You are evil, as always, right? Have you been philandering recently? If so, be careful of my sudden assaults. After dealing with the official matters, all that was left was our daily small talk. Honestly, I, who had been single all along, wouldn't know how to face Elisa if she had remained by my side. Rather, making small talk like this as we usually did felt more comfortable to me. How could I? If only I had such luck. You don't know how eccentric Bei Ifeng and company have been recently. The more gentlemen there are, the more difficult to keep them in check. Furthermore, I didn't even know how I felt towards her. Lovers, partners, and adopted daughter felt much stable than the previous two relationships. At the very least, I knew whenever I recalled that familiar silver hair and the features on her face, that rare hint of warmth and sweetness I felt was nostalgia for my family rather than love between a couple. I understand that Elisa had forked out a lot, and I know what she intends to achieve by doing so. However, whenever I try to view her as my lover, I somehow recall her voice and features when she was 6 or 7. I am not a beast, so how could I possibly lay my hands on her? Maybe it's because she is too important to me. That's why hesitation halts me. Sigh, the more I think about it, the more complicated it gets. Forget it, I will stop mulling over it. After all, I have never been able to make sense of it, and it is unlikely that I can in the future anyway. So let me just muddle my way through this. I knew that this was an irresponsible attitude similar to a cowardly ostrich. But my past experience had proven that settling the matter by burying my head in the sand was effective, even though awkward. After all, not everyone could live as long as I could. As long as I was able to drag on until the other party's death, their emotions wouldn't matter anymore. However, even if I wanted to be philandering trash, I have to at least be in a position to do so. In my first life, I died too early. In my second life, just when I had barely dug out something, I triggered a war and died pathetically. In my third life, for the sake of vengeance, I turned myself into a lich. Sometimes, looking at the couples who appear during Valentine's Day, I feel like I have lost. I can't help but to shout the triple times F slogan and throw a fireball at them. However, I would sometimes ponder the possibilities that could have occurred if I hadn't pursued strength vindictively. Perhaps I might had already found a suitable candidate to start a real family with, And at this moment, my children and grandchildren could have been surrounding me. At the very least, my adopted daughter, depending, wouldn't pity me and ridiculously develop a crush on me when I was already more than 300 years old. However, most baffling was my descendants appearing when I hadn't even settled my romance. Perhaps it was precisely because of Elise's deep understanding of me that she played these little tricks, leaving me with no way to reject her at all. Somehow, I ended up falling into a deep emotional debt, resulting in the current state of affairs. She didn't say so, but the chaos abyss can't possibly be a comfortable place to live in. Demons are the incarnations of chaos, and the demons below often revolt. Demons of the same tier often devour one another to evolve, and as such, battles are never ending. Maybe, from the moment she stepped into the chaos abyss, her fight had never stopped. It is truly difficult for her. However, Elise's help is something I cannot do without. It is useful to have a spy amidst the higher echelons of the Chaos faction. Just a single piece of news at a crucial moment can serve as the determining factor in a war. If we were attacked without any prior notice, we might have ended up losing the initiative right from the start. By delaying them for half a month, we managed to reverse the situation. Seems like I am sinking deeper into debt. There is no way I can repay it anymore. After ending our conversation, I heaved a sigh of relief. Putting aside the emotional debt I owed her, the invasion of the Beastmen army was quite troublesome to deal with. The one to face the brunt of the first wave would be Slower Kingdom. I had complicated emotions about this country. They proclaimed themselves as the true heirs of the mist. I had many comments just on this itself. After all, in my generation, Carwins and I were the only remaining royalty of the Mist Country. If that darned father of mine hadn't left behind an illegitimate son, Carwins and I would have been the only remaining main bloodline. Due to Carwins's horrendous reputation, Ran could only call herself my descendant even though it wasn't spoken of explicitly. History is history. However, since they acknowledged themselves as the descendants of the Mist Country, this made the situation interesting. If the final remaining prince and the sacred sword that represented the royal authority of the Mist Country returned, then shouldn't Slower Kingdom, who had proclaimed their royalty to be of the Mist bloodline, come under the command of Mist's emperor? If so, didn't that mean that Bivil III would have to hand over his crown and be satisfied with the position of an ordinary fief lord? Of course, everyone knew that it was impossible for that to happen. However, if I really brought the Roland sacred sword to their capital and demanded him do so, no one could know for sure what would happen. At the very least, ever since the rise of East Mist and the return of Roland and his knights, the Mist citizens migrating from Slower had never stopped. As a result, they made a decision, and what was presented before me was a gift of theirs to greet their ancestor. Sigh. On one hand, they proclaim themselves to be the true Mist bloodline, while on the other, they send a bunch of assassins to get rid of me. What filial descendants I have. Chapter 145, Dorch Festival Highlighted. In the language of the ancient civilization, it meant sage. In the ancient times, it was the name of a civilization which dominated an era. It branched off from the ancient humans, but from a certain point onward, it somehow became the main branch instead. Colossus civilization, the miraculous era of gears and steam engines, the inconceivable society where everyone is a wise man. There were countless other names and glorious titles for them. In that era in the distant past, they and their creations were once commonplace around the world. As the most advanced society then, they dominated the entire world. Massive floating islands and towers amid the clouds unveiled the secrets of the sky. A giant barrier erected on Island Turtle became an underwater city, and colossal titan magic statues were the guardians of their home. Even the dragons had to remain humble before their wisdom and strength. Even today, traces of the race could be seen, be it the floating island of the Blackwings, the air fleet of Alland Empire, or the Colossus Legion of the Solo Federation. Modern engineering and alchemy originated from it, and the ruins of Highlighted were fought over by all countries. After all, it was hard to say if a new discovery found in the ruins could be awakened from its dormancy to become an integral part of a revolution. During their peak, they even dared to debate about truth and reality with the gods. How such a powerful civilization abruptly ceased to be was always a mystery of history. Research papers on the civilization were written in various countries, but when it came to their history and the reason for their extinction, it simply wasn't clear. Was it a calamity or an invasion by aliens? I seen struck once more, a catastrophic plague, an update patch? It was none of them. The truth is actually quite simple, they had stepped on the line. To some existences, Hay-Ilatidum's destruction wasn't a secret. On the contrary, it was warning to them, telling them that there were some things that could be done, and there were some things that one shouldn't even think of. Perhaps, you might become as powerful as the gods, but please, by no means step into the realm of the gods. At the very least, do not allow those fellows above you to see it. Hay-Ilatidum was destroyed due to a god punishment, and this wasn't any incredible secret. At Cape Glite, the entrance to the spiral Empyrean Tower, there was a glyph inscribed in ancient words with the greatest crime of this race: life creation, man-made souls, racial immortality. These were the three greatest taboos that the gods didn't allow anyone to commit. The proud Hay-Ilatidumers had indeed trespassed into the domain of the creators. As a result, they had received divine retribution. However, this was only on the surface. An endless proliferation of their race would have exhausted this world of all its resources. But to those who were aware of the situation, they only had one crime. They managed to bypass reincarnation. When the death rate fell significantly and no new souls crossed the river Styx and entered the heavenly pillar, when life creation and man-made souls were able to create their own brethren, the original system of reincarnation was broken. Without a doubt, they had crossed the line for the two sleeping goddesses with such an act. As such, a god punishment fell upon them and they went extinct. Everything was that simple. In order to prevent others from uncovering such techniques once more, the black glyph outside the Empyrean Tower constantly reminded mortal experts they should never touch such techniques. Thus, even if someone discovered the route to immortality, they dared not utilize it to mass-produce immortals. As for the second clause of the three great crimes, man-made souls, the technology for it had already been lost for countless years. Of course, if there was oppression, there would naturally be those who fought back. The more the gods tried to suppress the mortals, the more people tried to fight back and trespass the barriers they set. The Holy Church had used the notion of heresy to sentence many people to death, and in reality, there were also numerous cases of heresy. The more forbidden something was, the easier one would grow curious of it. Throughout the years, the number of alchemists who were burned at the stake for challenging life alchemy was uncountable. Furthermore, some of them were part of the core of the church. After all, the sweet fruit of immortality was difficult to resist. The previous lunatic who neared the barrier was probably me. However, unlike my other predecessors who sought immortality, my goal was slightly different, causing my means to differ from theirs as well. When eternal night descends, all living will disappear from history. From then on, the undead shall last forever. If a country of dead were to be established and all living beings were converted into undead, then reincarnation would become a joke. In another sense, the world would be saved from its doom. Whenever I recalled the great scholar-like words of mine, that embarrassing dark history would play in my mind. I couldn't help feeling relieved about my decision to halt it abruptly back then. If a country of death were established, I would probably be destroyed by a god punishment the next moment. After which, Ayer had also personally verified my conjectures. It would be impossible for the gods to look on as a world belonging to the undead became established. However, there was a good reason why people still chose to fight back against the oppression of the gods. Even so, those three technologies contained great potential. I had been researching it all along and had achieved a certain level of results with them. However, I am not so foolish as to display my works before the gods and incur their wrath. Alright, I admit that the 7 deadly sins had already touched on the sensitive nerves of certain existences, but they also heaved a sigh of relief when they realized that I had no intent of mass-producing them. Most likely, I am already on their list of individuals to be wary of. If I had not started from the creation of powerful beings and instead, like some other undead lords, choose to achieve racial immortality, those up in the heavens would probably have come after me long ago. Of course, I wasn't the only heretic. While I am highly talented in the study of souls and undead creation, Amelia's life creation field was a direct challenge to the authority and dignity of the gods of creation. It was a simple feat for her creations to achieve immortality. If not for her cloaking the results of her study through plants and subconsciously circumventing the study of souls, she wouldn't have been left out when the others underwent God punishment. However, there were some things that were beyond the control of gods. For example, not all of Doomers died back then. Yes, there were still remnants of them, and they numbered more than one. In that history, if Olivia has solved the greatest bottleneck regarding the energy core, the most outstanding creation of Timmy then the master of magic engineering Timmy, one of the future founders of the magic engineering field, was a control system that allowed ordinary humans to wield supernatural abilities easily. In theory, an ordinary human who had never undergone specialized training could never wield supernatural abilities. Thus, he gave the magic engineered gears an independent soul such that they were able to manipulate the power of elements by themselves. All that the warrior wielding it had to do was pass down orders to it. If Olivia had given magic engineered gears blood and nutrients for them to operate, what Timmy granted it was a new soul. However, quite a few people had noticed it even though he went in a roundabout manner in an attempt to camouflage the technology. His research was taboo from the very start. He had infringed the taboo of man-made souls. When I learned of Timmy achievements, I was surprised as well. After all, I am quite well versed in the field of man-made souls as well. Any research relating to souls was extraordinarily difficult, and in order to achieve results, the researcher would probably have to abandon humanity and conscience. After all, it wasn't possible for them to remain moral given the experimental materials they required for their research. I had spent several centuries with countless experimental material before me, and yet, my research was still stuck in the phase of stitching together old souls through extreme emotions to create powerful but twisted warrior souls. On the other hand, he managed to reach the level of mass production of man-made souls. The difference in the level of our technology was truly massive. I had the advantage in terms of the creation's individual prowess, but it was a clear loss in the theoretical and technical aspects. Such results made the usually haughty me surprised. Could that snotty brat really be that much of a genius? Could he have skipped past the stage of knowledge and data accumulation? Or, just like Olivia, that shocking invention of his originated from a coincidental miracle? Thus, I paid more attention to little Timmy and heaped high expectations onto him. Eventually, I realized that I was wrong from the very start. There were some things that could be explained by coincidence and talents. 1897 AD, the summer of the year of the Griffin, on the 7th day of the 7th month. At least it was still summer in Alan Empire. The weather in the northern lands was gradually growing colder and it seemed like it was about to snow. In the children's coloring book, an oddly mature handwriting could be seen. However, the words written were completely different from the current languages existing in the world. The words written resembled numbers overlapping one another. If one looked at the pictures on top of the words, he would conclude that those weren't words but a series of pictures stacked over one another without any logical pattern among them. There were triangles, circles and twisted numerical digits. Perhaps to some, it was no more than a nonsensical abstract drawing, but to Timmy they were just some words he used usually, the Ha'ilatidum language. Big Sister Dina has been quite happy recently. It seems like her work is going well. The students in the school respect her greatly and a smile has been on her face recently. Yeah, Big Sister's smile has nothing to do with those male cats in heat surrounding her. On the contrary, she must be really annoyed by those flies buzzing around her. Looks like I have to find an opportunity to teach those despicable lads clinging on to her a lesson. From a certain sense, the reason why this Miss Dana hadn't been married yet was truly due to her little brother serving as baggage. However, he was holding her back in a way different from what she expected. Those toys of the goblins aren't mature yet, but they provided me with quite a bit of inspiration. I should be able to complete XT2 by next week. Let's start by sacrificing the son of the boss of the bread shop to it first. HMPH, to dare to cling to Lord Big Sister like that, even gifting her flowers yesterday. Upon recalling the bright smile on his elder sister's face when she accepted those flowers, Timmy rage flurried. In certain aspects, the young Timmy was much more mature than others expected him to be. However, in others, he was like an ordinary orphan who had lost his parents, holding great attachment and fondness to his elder sister who brought him up. This wasn't hard to comprehend and it was completely normal. Alright, I understand that this wasn't normal in any way, but I am just trying to convince myself that there were normal people by my side. Couldn't you all just go along with it for once? Timmy laid, Haku Evan the 17th. The former was the name everyone knew him as in this life, whereas the latter was the name of an ancient soul. When the god punishment descended, the Hailated met with its end. However, a master of man-made souls was unable to simply accept death like that. He wished to use his own knowledge and strength to avoid the unavoidable destruction. He wished to pass down the heritage of his civilization. A person's personality is simply forged by a soul with memories. Since souls return back to the world in the form of reincarnation, if I inscribed my memories onto a brand new soul, wouldn't that be equal to resurrection? In a certain sense, Master Haku succeeded. Every time his soul underwent reincarnation, along with the growth of his soul, a certain apparatus would be activated and his soul would regain the memories of his previous life. However, from a different point of view, he failed miserably. Once a person entered the path of reincarnation, he could be considered dead. A new soul meant a new life. Even if the soul had acquired the memories of its past, it would only be able to view it in a third-person perspective, as though looking through someone else's life. He had already succeeded in reincarnating 17 times, but unfortunately, with the exception of the memories of his first life, which had been stored over and over again, the memories from his other 16 lives had been washed clean by the river Styx, and whatever remained of them were negligible. He was still the same shut-in who isolated himself in the research lab. He was unable to remember how many times he had reincarnated. Even more so, he was unable to remember clearly whether he was the reincarnation of that legendary sage. All he knew was that the memory transfer system had detected souls identical to his and activated 16 times. Alright, since that was the case, the reason why that little adult was able to mature so quickly could be understood. The reason why he was able to create complete man-made souls was because of his previous inheritance. In a certain sense, Jimmy Lade was the true protagonist of the currently popular Transported to Another World novels. Putting aside the fact that he had a mobile grandfather he brought about alongside him, his parents had died and he had an elder sister whom he was mutually dependent on. Furthermore, he was destined to achieve greatness. Alright, at the very least, the current little Timmy Lade wouldn't think too much into it. He was only a child who matured earlier than others, and in order to protect his beloved elder sister, he was currently putting all of his efforts into designing the machine known as XD2 so as to destroy those pesky flies. Life has been fulfilling and it is good that Big Sister is happy. Even so, war is coming. Yet, this city remains so peaceful. Does everyone really have that much confidence in Roland? Thinking of the man who always wore a smile on his face, Timmy Lade couldn't help shivering with the jitters. His race talent ultimate eyes of wisdom allowed him to see through all disguises to peer into the true nature of a person. That day, when he first opened the door and saw Roland, he was almost scared to death. Too fearsome. Life and death exists simultaneously in a single person. To think that chaos and order could be fused together to form a single bloodline, his physical body is truly ridiculous. His soul is even more so. Remembering the apparition of the black skeleton, Timmy Lade shuddered. Countless obsessed and amended soul fragments pieced together to form a normal one, and the might I feel from the black skeleton obviously points him as the legendary Emperor Yang. Yet, this kind of ultimate incarnation of evil is actually the legendary hero of this country? Back then, Timmy Lade was in one of the last carriages moving to the secret base. Yet, no one would have thought that little Timmy would be the first person to recognize Emperor Yang. Sigh, I'll just see how it goes. At least life is not bad here. However, if war broke out, it is truly a wonder how they can be so self-confident. Is that Roland so trustworthy? Roland, who was out for diplomatic affairs, had sent news back. The Beastmen army is about to begin their winter assault. The Sloweaver Kingdom is going to be invaded. This news had already traveled through every single street and alley. Without a doubt, it would make the difficult winter even more unbearable. The Beastmen army invading in winter was something that was illogical and inconceivable. Furthermore, the notion proposed of them traversing across the difficult terrain to launch an attack was treated as a joke by many southern nobles. As such, Sloweaver thought that the envoy sent by the Mist Country was up to no good and evicted him from their borders. News of that had already spread. Yet, amidst countless criticisms, the Mist country was still able to remain quite confident in their sovereign. This in itself was inconceivable. Even when everyone thought that the Beastmen army was going to invade next year, the citizens of Mist country acted as though they were going to invade during winter and made preparations for battle as such. On the other hand, with the shadow of war looming right before them, while the East Mist military divisions were busy preparing for war, not only did the citizens not panic, they even continued carrying on with their lives leisurely, even conducting a festival today. Torch Festival. What a bizarre name. Opening the windows, the city square was already filled with tourist groups. It was said that this was a traditional festival from the Luhuang mountain city of the underground world. Every year, when the evening of this very day came, all young and single men and women would have to cover their features with a black robe and carry war flags and metal chains marked with the triple times F logo. They would prowl about the streets to hunt down their prey. Yes, prey. The prey of these triple times F members were the young couples engaged in romantic actions in public. On this long night, all black-robed triple times F hunters would scavenge for loving couples and tie the man onto a burning stake. Of course, they were only strolling around town. The triple times F members and passers-by could smash food on them to bless the couple, as well as to pray for a better harvest next year. Actually, carrying torches and touring around town was the same thing as a parade float procession. It was more of a cultural thing. It was said that this festival was created by Lord Wumians, and the hunter who managed to hunt down the most prey would receive official prize money and a present. There was also an urban legend that the winning hunter would be proclaimed as the love hunter and he would soon capture his long-awaited love. On the other hand, there was also another urban legend saying that the couple who survives the attack of the triple times F members to the very end will earn the blessings of the goddess of love. They will be together forever. Of course, most of these legends were just hearsay. Of the fellows from Luhuang Mountain City, the love hunter from year to year were either be Adam or Wumians himself, but they were still unable to rid themselves of their bachelorhood. However, the romantic legend of the blessing from the goddess of love still moved many of the young ladies' hearts. Many young guys also made use of this opportunity to muster their courage and pursue the one they loved. It is only a game. Perhaps we might even survive until the very end. If we do survive until the very end, will you listen to my words? You don't have to answer me, I will be content with you just listening to how I feel. Alright, the escapes were, indubitably, a method to win the other party's affection. Also, one was more likely to succeed with one's confession when one confessed in the midst of chaos. Furthermore, if they did survive to the very end, they would very likely become a couple. In the end, a certain someone was extremely disappointed. Quoting from his words, "How can so many couples appear right after such a sacred day of flames? Are the damned heavens really blind? Those heretics must be subjected to the judgment of the sacred flames." Eyesores everywhere. The next month, we will be conducting a cultural check of the city and all couples who display their affection in public will be fined. Alright, as usual, Wumian's sudden outburst was suppressed by the four heavenly kings and his external conscience, Elisa. However, this festival became celebrated by countless young men and women. With Princess Rin's approval, this year's festival was even backed by Definders officials, the scale significantly larger. Little Timmy stared out from the windows. A large amount of black-robed figures were waving scythes and torches, preparing for the start of the hunt. On the other side of the square, countless men and women were holding hands with one another. Damned couples, snuggling together right in front me. Look at how decadent our society has become. There were some sentiments that didn't require many words to express. Looking at those blissful couples, regardless of gender or age, the new generation of triple times F members let the torches in their souls burn, burn, burn. Without anyone leading them along, their rage exploded into a furious roar, trembling the heavens. Of course, there were also many people in there who added fuel to the fire. Look at how the lazy Adam was able to win the affection of Margaret. This is the magic of the festival. If you're single, how don't you give it a try? You might even be able to win your future spouse. This was the handwritten advertisement slogan by a certain prince. Under the board on which the slogan was written was a rental store by the undead knights under his command. Renting torches, whips, stakes, scythes, nooses, and many other commonly used tools. It only costs 3 bronze coins for each equipment per day. Glue, inked eggs, and stink bombs cost a bronze coin each. In order to thank our beloved customers, as long as your purchases total more than 10 bronze coins in our store, we will gift you free triple times F uniforms and flags. Long live the triple times F army. Looking at the agitated young men and women, Timmy Lade shook his head. This world seemed so far away to him. When he was about to shut the windows to focus on his research, he suddenly recalled something. Big Sister Dana should be off work early today, so why isn't she back yet? Could it be? When a certain possibility struck his mind, the shocked Timmy Lade quickly took out a small gadget and checked it. It was a mini GPS. At the current moment, the position of the bright dot was the city square before him. After a moment of silence, Timmy Lade walked over to the wardrobe, which was taller than him, and patted on it lightly. The wardrobe door immediately opened. It was a black robe. The original use of the robe was for Timmy's choir classes. However, Timmy, who didn't like singing, hated the robe and had never worn it. At the current moment, the silent Timmy was finding the robe more and more pleasing to his eye. Yeah, you'll be it. However, as he stared at the robe, he couldn't help thinking that something was amiss. After pondering for a moment, a thought struck him and he used a red marker to scribble on the back of the robe, triple times F. Ha, burn them all. The childish sounding voice carried in its undertone the determination to kill. In the center of the room, countless machines came to life. The flickering green light in those man-made irises seemed to bear testimony to the young boy's ability to turn his words into reality. Chapter 146, War breaks at top students' glasses. These are ordinary silver-rimmed glasses, and wearing them will make you seem slightly smarter. Yeah, just slightly. Let me tell you, these are obviously ordinary glasses that the top students use to blind their competitors. Top students' decayed teeth. Yes, it's these teeth. Woo, it's this one. It almost killed me. Top students' dentures. My dentures are actually poisonous teeth filled with venom. Don't force me to bite you. Lick. Ah, it's poisonous. When you gather the full set top students' glasses, top students' decayed teeth, and top students' dentures, you will gain the special effect on masquerading as the top student. Your retorting abilities will be increased by 30%. Integrity score will be lowered by 30%, while your cuteness might will be increased by 30%. System hasn't eaten my medicine yet, but I still feel cute. Where should I start retorting from? Should I start from how the 3 top students' equipment would turn one into a dunce? Or should I start from how I can equip those 2 teeth? Furthermore, if I put those poisonous teeth into my mouth, I would probably die. Further, what's with those additional abilities? What the heck is cuteness might? Do I need better retorting ability or decreased integrity score? My integrity already has no lower limits. Alright, I have already long given up on treatment. Alright, there are too many points to retort about this. There is no way I can retort on them all. Alright. Every time I see those Gakapin rewards which were filled with numerous retort points, my desire to retort would skyrocket. At this moment, after a whole series of reposts, I panted heavily with the system interface before me, my gaze fixated on it. I will kill you with my glare, glower you to death. Alright, I knew that I looked foolish like that. However, what could I do to an existence I couldn't reach but kept doing me in? Nothing, except killing them with my glare. Perhaps I had spent too many fate points reconstructing my body. The recent Gakapin reward was getting worse and worse. The items that I had obtained were mostly objects that left people speechless. The wordless Book of Heaven, the unparalleled way of heaven, is contained within it. Alright, I didn't know what the Book of Heavens was about, but if a book had no words, how could one comprehend it? Balala the fairy's transformation wand. I ate a lot of medicine today and feel cute. If you sing in the name of the moon, I'll punish you and dance while transforming. There will be bonus enhancement to your stats. Furthermore, it is pink. Alright, I don't think that I need to go any further than that. After managing to get this non-mainstream magical wand, I immediately walked over to my window, opened it and threw it out. Who would say such embarrassing words? Farewell. Sacred Sword, Togashi must die. The new member of the One Shot One Kill, must die, Sword series, the product of the resentment of readers and editors. The One Shot One Kill, wrecking their ass. Effects apply to those who submit their manuscripts late and tour in the name of finding inspiration for their work. Also, it would be an incredible sight if you use it along with the one above. Alright, putting aside those obviously ill-humored, bizarre objects, the system did give some good items as well. DF-41 Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. Don't say that the system didn't give you anything good. As long as you are able to use it and dare to use it, this object is definitely formidable. When I saw the object, I was shocked. However, when I saw the user manual that came along with it, I knew that I have been duped. It requires specialized equipment for the launch of the missile. I can still find a way to solve that. But what do you mean by the missile will be locked if the password entered is incorrect? Where can I find the password required for the missile launch? Do I have to rip it apart to examine it? However, if it explodes on me, will you pay me? Furthermore, how can there be an intercontinental missile in a world revolving around magic? I dare you give me something normal, like the incantation of a powerful forbidden spell. And the system really did it. In the next draw, I got a powerful, otherworldly spell incantation. Dragon Slave, darkness beyond twilight, crimson beyond blood that flows, buried in the stream of time is where your power grows. When the incantation from my childhood appeared before me, my entire body started trembling in anticipation. Oh, as long as I chant the incantation, I will be able to borrow strength from the otherworldly demon lord to cast this ultimate level forbidden spell. Without using much mana, I will be able to use this highly destructive forbidden spell. Awesome! Thus, I looked for a remote location to experiment it myself. Did I fail? Was there a problem with the incantation? No. The items from the system were all authentic. I succeeded and the incantation was the official one and it worked. I managed to connect with the otherworldly demon lord. Welcome to the otherworldly demon lord summoning system. The demon lord whom you are calling is currently unavailable. Please try again later. Jujadu, I thank you for your support of the incantation system. Alright. The demon lord was busy and he was unavailable. I could understand that the incantation system was the exclusive privilege of a certain other world and it was normal for me to be unable to get into contact with him, but what was with the reply afterward? After which, please rate our services. Are you satisfied, or are you very satisfied? Of course, it is also alright for you to choose the completely satisfied option. Of this dear customer, I am Father. If you don't want to use my services, feel free to leave customer service. What can I do? I hung up and stared speechlessly at the blue sky. Actually, this wasn't the worst. Once I managed to draw a bunch of legendary treasures. Looking at those orange-colored artifacts, I almost died from delight. Ha! 1-star ball, 2-star ball, 7-star ball. If I gather all 7, can I really realize my wish? Back then, I hadn't been duped by the system too badly yet. After drawing 6 Dragon Balls straight and receiving confirmation from the system about the effects of the 7 Dragon Balls, I waited expectantly for the final Dragon Ball to fall into my hands. In fact, I even started to plan on how I should make use of my wish and how I should achieve the greatest benefits through it. I even filled an entire journal with my plans. However, in the dozen or so Gakuben draws in the next year, I never received the final Dragon Ball. Eventually, I could only howl helplessly in anger. From the very start, you were trying to scam me, right? Is this the darn game lottery system that our country came up with? There is no prize at all, right? Due to the karmic effects regarding the 4-star Dragon Ball being too great, I can only arrange a mission for you. If you are able to triumph over its guardian, it will be yours. I had watched the Dragon Ball manga back then. Who was the owner of the 4-star Dragon Ball? Wasn't it the protagonist of the manga, Son Goku? Challenge Son Goku, recalling those ridiculous experts in the manga who destroyed planets as they pleased. I shuddered. However, I soon remembered how the manga was when it first started, when the plot was still normal. Back then, the 7 Dragon Balls had already appeared and perhaps, the one to appear before me wouldn't be such a ridiculous existence. There was still a chance for success. It is the young Goku from the start, right? It can't be that it is the Super Saiyan who destroyed planets with a single strike in the later part of the manga. Why aren't you answering? It can't be that it is the even more ridiculous Super Saiyan 3? Don't worry, it's not 3, it's 33. Super Saiyan 33. Don't try to fool me. I read the manga. There is no Super Saiyan 33 in that world. Cough. It is a parallel universe that we live in. Due to the overwhelming popularity of Dragon Ball in the world, the editor didn't allow the manga to end. As such, The show dragged on from Super Saiyan 3 to Super Saiyan 33. Sigh, you don't know how ludicrous the power system became in the end. At the very start, they destroyed worlds and planets, but eventually they went on to destroy galaxies and universes. Furthermore, since you already know that it was taken from that real parallel universe, given the plot the Dragon Ball world was going at, how they were breaking their limits here and there, do you think that it was possible for even more powerful antagonists to not appear later on? If I were to say, not just Super Saiyan 33, as long as that world doesn't get destroyed, even Super Saiyan 333 is possible. Alright, there's no need for me to say anything. Even the normal Super Saiyan transformation was able to kill me in an instant. If Super Saiyan 33 came, wouldn't the heavens, earth, and even the air be destroyed with a single flick? I didn't wish to die that pathetically yet, thus I rejected the goodwill of the system. As time went by, and the number of times I got scammed increased, I roughly comprehended a general rule. It wasn't that the system had dedicated its soul fully to pranking others, but its abilities were limited. Distorting the future required one to bear its karmic effects. The laws governing equivalent exchange still needed to be obeyed. Thus, my dream of obtaining powerful treasures by drawing with minimal fate points was shattered. For a period of time, I dedicated my soul to drawing mystical secret manuals. Godly equipment and unique and rare treasures were struck from my list of options. If I obtained strength from the otherworldly knowledge and changed the future, it would be my own doing rather than the doing of the system. Thus, the system only need to bear minimal karmic effects. This was like a conspicuous loophole left behind by the system. If I don't choose you, who else will I choose? Thus, even though I drew numerous objects that left one speechless through the mystical secret manual's choice, such as the Wordless Book of Heaven and Dragon Slave Incantation Manual and other books which was in the wrong universe, as well as the Art of Nine Negations, Sunflower Manual, Manual to Cross-Dressing as a Beautiful Lady, and Photoshop, Manual to Creating a Beauty. They were all authentic, but it was completely inconceivable to me what they could be used for. Alright, let's forget all of those. At the very least, those research notes of the otherworldly mages were indeed good stuff. They were much more useful than those unreliable otherworldly treasures and I had benefited greatly through them. The reason why I used my Gakupin draws recently to get unique and rare treasures was to draw a Spring of Drowned Man for the unfortunate crows as compensation. However, it was a pity that the entire roulette was filled with the top students series' objects and there was no sign of the Spring of Drowned Man appearing at all. Forget it. Timing is important and Gakupin. If one's complexion, hand, and luck are bad, one shouldn't treat himself as the protagonist of the world. I should try giving it a change and drawing mystical secret manuals instead. As fate points were pumped in, the rapidly spinning roulette stopped. Looking at the secret manual which popped out, I couldn't help gasping in shock. It was a game walkthrough. On its cover, roaring beastmen armies and countless beastmen heroes could be seen. Ding! Congratulations on obtaining Highland Beastmen Invasion Game Walkthrough, the 100 Powerful Tribes Information Guide. System notice: not only does it list the unique troops of each and every tribe and their fighting prowess, it even tells you about the personal preferences of each chieftain and heroic figures. If you still fail to achieve victory in the war, carry your head to meet me. System: can you not be so obvious when cheating? However, you did well this time, I like it. I give you 32 likes. Prince Roland in the East Mist communal country is a fake. He isn't some awakened returning heroic spirit, but propaganda East Mist uses to calm the hearts of their citizens. When I heard the reports Louis were kingdom sent to the other countries and churches, I wasn't surprised at all. This was within expectations. Even so, I was still enraged by their actions. Famer Carson, is it? Since you were willing to send assassins to get rid of me for the sake of holding on to your authority, then what could coming up with lies to deny the existence of your ancestors count as? I could understand that they were denying my identity to maintain the integrity and legitimacy of their sovereignty, but they were clearly trying to stab themselves in their own foot by the latter part of the report. The Deer Fortress is still completely calm. I have just signed a peace treaty with the numerous Beastmen tribes. Yet that fake Roland spread rumors about an impending Beastmen invasion. This shows that he has bad intentions in mind. He hopes to tear apart our amiable relationship with our Beastmen allies. From a certain sense, Sluira could be considered as the successor of the Mist Country's legacy. However, they denied the traditions and values of the Mist Country. They chose to employ goodwill diplomacy, siding with the other larger kingdoms on most occasions, even willing to resort to bribing the Beastmen tribe whom they bordered. One must say, from a certain perspective, they truly did well. In human society, Sluira Kingdom's reputation was much better than East Mist Communal Country and Mist Country. Considering how difficult it was to capture Kamo's dear fortress, the chieftains who had received large amounts of bribes would also direct their attention to the other human territories. They had enjoyed more than 2 decades of peace and they had not been embroiled in most major historical wars. For the Beastmen tribes, as long as it was en route to their ancient homeland, it was the same no matter whom they invaded. The current situation was different from the past Mist Country, and the Beastmen bordered with more than one human country. Since Sluira had decided to employ the carrot and the stick, it was much wiser for them to choose an easier target to work on. Of this method of diverting the catastrophe to the other countries, the Karsumt Communal Country, which faced greater pressure from the Beastmen's assault, was full of complaints. Even so, it didn't affect Sluira's diplomatic strategies in any way, so they had no choice but to tolerate it. It was true that the Karsumt Communal Country was a nail stuck there to deal with the pressure from the Beastmen. After East Country's fall, they had borne the brunt of the impact from most of the brutal human-beastmen wars. The motive for the Beastmen's invasion southward was simple. In the short term, their goal was likely to annex some land so they could hunt for food and resources. As for the long term, they probably only had one ultimate aim: to recapture the original land of the Beastmen, the Blanluya Plains. Currently, the Blanluya Plains weren't part of the Beastmen's territory. It belonged to a powerful human empire, Saint Antonio, and it served as its granary. The Karsumt Communal Country was a vassal state of Saint Antonio Empire. It was said that the emperor of the Karsumt Communal Country was a high noble of the Saint Antonio Empire, and most of the powerful troops of the country originated from Saint Antonio. Every year, young generals would suddenly appear in their ranks and display their talents. Most of these talents were Saint Antonian. There was even a tale about how they crushed their own foot with the boulder they lifted. The Beastmen army had never given up on their dreams to return back to their homeland. Back then, when the Beastmen had occupied the previous territory of the Mist Country, due to their powerful reproductive abilities, they were able to engage in numerous large-scale and small-scale battles. This made those countries who were pestered by them start to miss that smelly and tough country of barbarians, which they destroyed with their own hands. 30 to 40 wolf knights may not mean anything much in a frontal assault, but if they snuck into our territories, they can cause countless civilian deaths. Those cockroach-like beastmen who reproduce at an insane rate can't be completely killed no matter what we do. We need a barrier against them. As such, under the combined efforts of countless empires, the Karsumt Communal Country was formed. To date, this newly established country only had 200 years of history behind it. After its founding, it nailed itself firmly at the entrance of the Beastmen territory. Large amounts of resources and talent were continuously supplied there from the core of human society, thus forcefully blocking the Beastmen off at the highlands. Karsumt Communal Country's Hollis Fortress and Sluira Kingdom's Kamo's Tier Fortress became important fortresses of the human society and hindering the army of the Beastmen tribes after the fall of the Mist Country. With the fortress city's natural terrain advantage and the support from countless human countries behind them, in the past 200 years, they had managed to drive the Beastmen army back to their lands. The Kamo's Deer Fortress was named after the previous great chieftain Kamo who died there. However, the situation was different this time. Urgent news. War has broken out. The Beastmen army has invaded Sluira. It has circumvented Kamo's fortress and 4 mid-sized cities have been massacred. Sluira has currently been placed on full alert. TL notes, from Sailor Moon Balila Togashi is the mangaka for Hunter x Hunter Slayers, greater than Lena in versus spell. The latter is the incantation. Chapter 147, Overture. In the view of most humans, the Highland Beastmen were deprived of spellcasters. However, to the armies guarding the northern lands, Such a saying was obviously far from the truth. The shamans and witch doctors of the beastmen were spellcasters which left people with headaches. The former were skilled with connecting with the elemental spirits to induce all kinds of natural phenomenon to attack their enemies or to support their comrades. Not only was the consumption rate for their spells low, the effects of their spells were also apparent. Their offensive abilities were in no way inferior to mages, and their support ability was comparable to priests and holy knights. Even more so, the shamans were skilled at working with one another, and as such, they had a natural advantage in creating strategic level magic spells. Their earthquake spell was an incredible weapon for raiding cities. On the other hand, as a highly threatening spellcaster job which had few means of protecting themselves, if a powerful close combatant were to get into proximity with the shamans, we can give him 10 seconds to plead for Mother Earth's blessing, 5 seconds to draw his weapon, 3 seconds to do meaningless retaliation or to chant an incantation, and the final second to end him. Every minute, there are 14 shamans who are being killed. Please do not slaughter shamans and support the law allowing shamans to instant cast earth drifting spell, teleportation spell. Support the cancellation of the shamans as a job. Shaman Self-Help Fund. Putting aside their individual prowess and their obvious flaws, the reason why shamans were often prioritized as a target in battle said much about their powerful support and long-distance offensive ability. This happened to be what the beastmen, who specialized in physical brawls, lacked. If the shamans were the ideal combination with beastmen warriors, then witch doctors were the best backup. They specialized in concocting poisons and antidotes alike, casting all kinds of curses and witchcraft, as well as dispelling curses and healing the wounded. Even though their treatment methods were a little ridiculous, they used bloodletting to treat all ailments, after all, regardless of whether it was a common cold or migraine. Even though they didn't know what went into the medicine that they concoct, there were lizard droppings, pitch black grass, and many unexplainable ingredients in it. It was a fact that they had saved many lives in the highlands which lacked doctors and medicine. Naturally, the ones whose treatment failed had died and the dead were unable to complain. Spellcasters were always lacking, and that fact rang even louder for beastmen tribes. For the beastmen who were skilled at physical brawling, it was difficult to find a clan member who had a good head. Furthermore, the person had to have talent in spellcasting as well. In each tribe, these two spellcasting jobs were severely lacking and highly valued. Shamans and witch doctors possessed high standing in all of the beastmen tribes and many of them even became chieftains. However, at this very moment, the precious shamans and witch doctors became menial laborers. They were walking up and down the altar to check on it while the furious onlookers were frustrated to the point that they started using whips to lash them. Damn it! We were already so careful. How could a problem still occur? The Blood Axe tribe's Euron Blood Ox wore a grim expression. The tribute ritual had been conducted by his own tribe and most of his tribe's elite shamans and witch doctors had been devoted to it. The amount of tributes used for it was massive, yet it ended up like this. How could they not feel disappointed? Was it a failure? No, that's not it. At the very least, the warm flames in the surroundings lighted by the red-orange light bore testimony to that. Was a success? That was clearly not the case. The tight-knit eyebrows and frustrated expressions on the chieftains explained it all. At the very least, the results were not as they initially hoped for. Lord, the results are out. The blessing was a success and it had the effect of warding off the cold, but even though the old shaman reported as such, nobody's expression relaxed because of it. That was because during the crucial period, that brilliant flame was suddenly cut off and the demon lord's furious howl echoed in everyone's ears. You hope to earn my blessings despite giving tribute to me with such filthy objects. To dare to place fake souls upon my altar. This is blasphemy. You all are challenging my dignity. I curse you all. I curse that you all will face destruction. To think that you all would dare deceive a demon lord. Upon realizing that there was a problem with the tributes presented to her, the furious demon Marquis sent the flames of her wrath over. The massive flames morphed into a giant golem with a spear in its hands and it started to wreak havoc in the base. Furthermore, the open demon doors meant that the demon army was about to arrive at their base. Fortunately, the old shaman, who was heading the ritual, closed the connection with the chaos abyss in time, making the Inferno avatar of the Marquis return back to the elements and closing the dimensional gate. Otherwise, It wouldn't just be a matter of the failure of the blessings. If things went badly, the entire camp might have even been destroyed by the furious demon Marquis. Given such circumstances, for the ritual to not be a failure, the various chieftains were surprised. Huh? The blessing didn't fail? Iran was astonished. He knew how difficult it was to deal with Elisa and he had prepared himself for failure. The effects of the blessing aren't complete and they can only ward off the cold temporarily. Also, based on the rate the element is dissipating at, the blessing will cease to be in 30 days. Hearing those words, the chieftains heaved a sigh of relief. When the ritual failed, everyone was prepared for the worst. Even though the original 3 months of blessing was cut to less than a month, this was much better than the worst case scenario they had prepared themselves for. Have you checked on the issue with the tributes? Which tribe was the one that used an imitation at such a crucial period? I want the chieftain's head to be staked on a flagpole. Iran was furious. They almost passed by this hard to come by opportunity, even offending a demon lord at that. There would be trouble awaiting them in the future. The demon lords were well known for being difficult. It would already be a blessing for people if they did not cause any trouble of their own accord. If someone wanted their assistance, aside from waiting on them properly, the summoner had to pay the expensive appearance fee as well. The most stable currency in use in the lower realm was the souls of the upper realm. In order to please the Inferno Marquis, the tributes used this time were top quality slaves from each and every tribe. It was impossible for the ritual to fail for no reason. The demon lords were known for being fickle-minded, but they were even more reputed to care to speak the truth. If they were displeased with someone, they would immediately make a move. If there was a treasure in sight that they wanted, they would immediately snatch it. Since the demon lord roared at them because she was unsatisfied with the tributes, it was very likely for there to be a problem with the tributes. The old shaman of the tortoise tribe slightly hesitated. However, upon seeing the confused gazes the chieftains were shooting him with, he knew that he had no choice but to say it. As such, he gritted his teeth and spoke. The tributes have been all expended, but the blessing was incomplete. Given that there was a loss in power in the ritual, the souls used in the ritual must not be enough. However, it was impossible to check on it since the tributes are no longer here. However, based on the timing when Lord Elisa became enraged, it matches with the timing when the Blood Axe tribe's tribute was being presented. Instantaneously, the furious Iran, who was still interrogating others, became speechless. To think that his tribe would be the cause of the trouble? Hostility appeared in the eyes of the surrounding chieftains. They also seemed to recall that the Inferno statue's howl was directed toward the Blood Axe tribe's camp. Even so, Iran was so determinedly pointing the blame to other tribes. Wasn't this a case of a thief calling another a thief? Unknowingly, the seed of discord had been planted. One still required prestige to head the other tribes, and the consecutive failures had struck a blow to Iran's prestige. In the eyes of some others, Iran losing his ability to rally all of the other tribes could mean that they might be able to replace him as the great chieftain. Putting aside those seemingly peaceful but discordant chieftains, when the short ritual was terminated abruptly, the will of a certain someone had already descended onto this world. The person had taken some of the tributes for her personal use. Currently, the altar was a mess. In the midst of the tributes, a fiery red apparition was slowly becoming corporeal. Breathing the cold air that was finally without the smell of sulfur, a smile appeared on the familiar, beautiful face. Similar to the avatar of the goddess of storm in the city of rain, the silver-haired demoness had secretly sent an avatar to the mortal realm. Master, do you miss me? Have you made preparations to welcome me? I did say that I would conduct sudden inspections. When large-scale aerial battles had yet to become a possibility, terrain remained an important aspect of surface battles. Kamo's Tier, rebuilt from the remains of the Mist Country's original steel fortress, was surrounded by sharp cliffs. The heavy city walls had been plated with the expensive enchanted alloy. What flowed in the moat of the fortress was a type of unfreezable oil made of alchemy. Once lit, the flames would burn furiously for 2 months straight before the fuel ran out. A third of Sluweaver's military strength and 40% of the country's spellcasters were gathered in the city. A total of 9 large-scale mage tower and 30 mid-scale mage tower faced the ravine near the Beastmen's territory. Furthermore, The fire ballistae placed throughout the wall were so dense it made goosebumps rise by looking at it from afar. 200 years of painstaking effort and investment had turned it into one of the few impregnable fortresses on the continent. As an infallible fortress, it had locked the beastmen out from the human society for 200 years. It was said that its establishment was heavily supported by the countries of the northern lands and the several powerful empires of the continent. Ever since its establishment, those city walls which even giants were unable to climb over became one of the greatest obstructions to the dreams of the Highland beastmen. Lacking siege weapons, they found themselves helpless against it. Conquering a fortress of such size with the few aerial tribes and troops they had was a mere dream. Even the previous great chieftain of the beastmen tribes had died beneath the walls of the fortress. But if I had to speak, it was all a mistake from the very start. Does an impregnable fortress really exist in the world? You may be able to defend yourself against a regular army, but are you able to guard yourself against assassinations and forbidden spells? Placing all of their eggs into a single basket was the wrong strategy. Even if the fortress was truly impregnable, the enemy could choose to circumvent the fortress. Even if there is no plausible route at the moment, it is possible for the enemies to simply pave one themselves. The Maginot Line of Earth had already proven that only establishing a fixed defensive line against an enemy was a foolish decision. However, the generals and military officials of this world viewed fortresses as an important and classic defense strategy. Slowire was also a country that believed in the importance of fortresses and had benefited for centuries due to the existence of the fortress. After this painful lesson, all of the military schools would probably research the causes of failure of this war and use it as a case study, a negative role model for why being overly obsessed with fortresses was a foolish decision. The trade and communication agreement which Slowire had just signed with the beastmen was instantaneously torn apart. Without any forewarning, the beastmen had infiltrated deep into their lands, ferociously tearing apart every single human they could see. The earth elemental god Imrda Lorcan was definitely much more low profile than his colleague. With a single high-intensity earthquake, he changed the geographical structure of the northern lands, causing another narrow ravine leading from the highlands to the northern lands to appear, thus making that impregnable fortress like the eyes of a cave dweller, ornamental. The beastmen army had charged directly to the core of the Slowire kingdom before spreading all around to assault and take down the various cities, of which, half of the entire Blood Axe tribe headed straight for Slowire's capital, Anchiwan. In order to create even more chaos and keep the military of the various fief lords under control, more than 100 hunting squads consisting mainly of wolf knights conducted guerrilla attacks on the various armies. Given how they themselves were in a precarious situation, the fief lords chose to utilize the army for their own needs. As such, in less than a single month since the outbreak of war, Anchiwan was already in an emergency situation. Slowire's downfall came even faster than anyone had expected. At this moment, I am helpless. It was not that I didn't want to do anything, but the first round of snow had struck before I could return to the Eastmist communal country. Even though its arrival was within expectations, it was still unwelcomed. There were too many things that I needed to attend to, and the snow truly fell at an inopportune time. The winter of the northern lands was exceptionally brutal. The white snow had already covered all of Defender. Snow half a meter deep piled up on the streets. There were barely any pedestrians in sight on the streets. Such weather was a disaster. The horses would sink into the snow if they tried to traverse this weather. The weather would cause their body temperature to fall rapidly, and precious war horses would simply die for naught. Given the underlying rule that had gradually come into place in the northern lands in these few years, when a country had been invaded by the beastmen or other foreign race, the other countries had to provide them a certain level of aid or send their troops to reinforce them. Back then, the one to enjoy such aid was often Karsumt communal country. However, it was a pity that the snow that affected most of the countries in the northern land had changed it all. The resources were unable to arrive on time and the reinforcement was stuck on the way. On the other hand, the beastmen were still persisting in their attacks to capture the capital of Slowire. This was a hopeless situation. The cruel natural world was equal for all. Traditionally, there would be a ceasefire when the snow was sufficiently heavy to lock down the mountains. After all, to the warriors, dying on the battlefield was a kind of dream. No matter what, it was somewhat a shame to freeze to death on the battlefield. The family members of the soldier would often be tempted to curse at the military officers if their family member had died so meaninglessly on the battlefield. Fortunately, as the effect of the fire god's blessing faded, the beastmen gradually started to limit their sphere of operations and use the cities they had taken down as their base. Truthfully, even without Elisa's fire god's blessing, the war would have still broken out early. On another aspect, while Elisa's name had been cursed at by the higher echelons of the beastmen, Iran and his blood axe tribe, due to the accumulation of rage and resentment against them, started to be isolated within the Alliance army while their reputation plummeted. Although the Beastmen Alliance army being split into four had strategic considerations, it also shows that Iran, who had meager prestige, was unable to hold on to his leadership position. At this moment, the other three chieftains also had tribes that supported them. The next Beastman sovereign would be determined by the results of this battle. Everyone knew they could not delay this war to spring of next year. The human kingdoms would not watch idly as Antuan fell and Sluira was destroyed. The moment the snow halted and the army was able to move, it would spell the outbreak of war. Furthermore, given that the war would be conducted in the midst of winter, it would determine the survival of the various races within the lands. The war was bound to be exceptionally cruel. Even the non-combat forces would find their numbers dwindle significantly. At present, I was busy dealing with military affairs as well. Has news from Hoyle arrived? What is the progress with the mines? Every single Grey Dwarf was a natural miner. They possessed the race talents, rock treading and ore perception, of which, the sensitivity that the blacksmith master Grey Dwarf Hoyle held toward ores was not something his peers could compete with. Regardless of whether it was for trade or military purposes, the East Mist required endless amounts of ore. At present, given how many newly created divisions were still using wooden training weapons, the military was in dire need of weapons to grow stronger, and the manufacturing of weapons had to begin from the mines. This was the lifeline of the East Mist. Even when war had already broken out, I still regarded it as our priority. While I returned to Definder in advance due to the outbreak of war, I left Hoyle and the other Grey Dwarves at the barbarians' territory to hunt for mines. If even they were unable to find any ore, it would be impossible for the human miners to find any. Good news. The mountainous range is indeed a mine deposit. We have already found 2 superior metal mines, 1 magic metal mine, and 2 jewel mines. However, it will take a period of time before we can develop it. Lord Hoyles applied for the assistance of machines and spellcasters, and he had specifically listed the Bar brothers to assist him in his work. Exploding the mines seems like it is the only viable solution to achieve results in the short run. Fine, send the Bar brothers to help him. However, remember to warn him to take note of their safety. Do not come into conflict with the barbarians. They are inflexible people, offending them once means offending them for life. Yes, Your Highness. We will convey your words to him. Then, the next matter is regarding the names of the newly created divisions and their flags. The various assistants came to and fro my desk. The military documents that had accumulated in my period of absence crushed the desk. Innumerable problems came rushing at me all at once. While I do not intend to interfere with the governance of the country, just the military affairs themselves were enough to give me a splitting headache. At such a moment, I couldn't help but miss Elisa. After all, while others could only serve as assistant, Elisa, who I had brought up personally, had working abilities that were in no way inferior to mine, and I could dump all of my troubles on her so as to slack off. Alright, Elisa was still in the chaos abyss and thinking about all these was meaningless. I should devote my attention to the problems before me first. The situation in Antuan isn't going well. It is possible for the city to fall at any moment now. No matter what, we were both offspring from the same origin. Even though we were filled with discontentment and resentment against that country, upon seeing it on the verge of destruction, these young assistants felt uneasy. I nodded my head, indicating to the other party that I had received his words. After which, I fell into deep contemplation. No doubt, we had to save them. Even though I was extremely unsatisfied with their royalty, I couldn't watch as the Mist citizens in those countries were slaughtered. Furthermore, the moment Sluira fell completely, East Mist would be embroiled in the war, and the current East Mist was not well equipped for war yet. While we had to save them, The important aspect to consider was how we should go about doing it. We had to build a reputation for ourselves to gain the initiative in our foreign diplomacy in the northern lands while not going too far to rattle the foundations of the already weak East Mist. After a long time, I finally made my decision. Send a letter to Anxion and say that the new released Mist requires a sufficient reason to interfere in the war, so they have to request for help publicly. Right. Have them send a request to the various churches as well. Yes, a request for us to send our troops to help them ward off the invaders. Only this way will Lord Woomians recognize the necessity and justice of the war, and we will be able to send our troops to aid them. Didn't you say that I was an imitation not too long ago, claiming that the East Mist was deceiving the world, even sending a report to the various kingdoms and churches? Now, I will see how you will settle with the aftermath yourselves. Yeah? Spread the former part of the message publicly, let the other countries understand the new system East Mist operates by. As for the latter, dump it on the Emperor Faemor Carson. If you want me to save you, lower your heads and reflect on your actions. Swallow everything that you had spouted previously. I was not worried that Faemor wouldn't lower his head. After all, the situation in Anxion wasn't going well, and when there was a tangible threat to their lives, so many people would become much more obedient. HMPH, it is truly such an irony. Right after claiming that I am an imitation, they immediately turn around to request assistance from the imitation. Furthermore, the one who will come to their aid will most likely be the mnemonic army they spoke of. After pondering the matter for a while, under the current circumstances, the most suitable reinforcements to send them was still my undead army, who didn't fear the cold. In the previous report, that fellow termed my army as the demonic army, not hiding his contempt and frustration at all. How can I miss out on such an ideal opportunity to conduct a winter hunt? It is also an ideal opportunity to train our troops. Have every knight bring along 2 squires with them. Have those little fellows prepare themselves. We will head out as soon as the snow stops. TL. Maginot Line was the French's defense line against Germany in World War II. Chapter 148. Hunting and being hunted. Damwon village was famous for its delicacy smoked silverfish. There were countless numbers of said village in the entirety of Sluweer. At this current moment, snow was gradually falling and the peaceful village was no longer as peaceful as it was. The fences used to keep out the wild beasts could not hinder the true beasts. Under the concealment of night, the Grey Wolf Knights entered their lands and a feast of bloodshed began in the little village. The guards and watchmen of the village were slaughtered immediately. Under the sudden raid of the trained Wolf Knights, the guards of the village, who only had the experience of challenging ogres at most, didn't even have the opportunity to sound the alarm. At 2 a.m., 30 Wolf Knights entered the village. At 2:15, the militia captain, village head, and other leaders were dragged out from their beds and their headless corpses were used to feed the wolves. At the same time, their heads were used to drain the survivors' will of retaliating against them. By 2:40, all 500 people of the village were dragged to the little square near the entrance of the village. After the women and children had been dragged to one corner, the slaughter began. Perhaps not even a single young man of the village was spared. There were people who tried to fight back, but against true warriors, the retaliation of the civilians was completely meaningless. Furthermore, the Wolf Knights were already elites of the combative beastmen. At 3, the efficient executions had ended and the Wolf Knights had left. Before leaving, they casually set the entire village afire, the paws of the wolves leaving bloodied paw prints in the snow. The Wolf Knights splashed with blood were silent, but the burning remains of the village and the heart-rending cries would be in their nightmares for years to come. They may have been hesitant at the very start, but it was already the 4th village they had destroyed in this week. They took less than an hour from their entry to their departure to purge the entire village. Their conscience was already numb to the slaughter. This is war. It is neither sacred nor justified. The only thing that needed to be considered was how to win. The mission entrusted to these packs of Wolf Knights was to roam about the human kingdoms and cause panic and chaos in order to divert the strength and attention of the other factions. Even though their means were vile, it was effective. The beastmen were not immoral beasts. Every single expert in their midst felt contempt for their actions of slaughtering civilians. People respected the fearless knights who dared to charge towards the massive dragons, but they would not respect a butcher who derived pleasure from slaughtering civilians. Father, How did you fare in the war with the humans? How many human generals did you kill? None, I only slaughtered a few thousand civilians. Upon thinking about the question his children would ask him upon his return, even though the captain of the Wolf Knight section, Eckerly, was famous for his bravery and his tribe, he didn't know how he should reply to this question. At this moment, he still smelled the stench of blood all over the place with his sensitive nose. His child's questioning of his doings had become his greatest nightmare, and his soul felt worn out. For the beastmen, challenging a powerful adversary and dying in battle in the midst of it was an unparalleled honor. On the other hand, slaughtering the weak meant that the person did not possess mental fortitude. Such a warrior would be viewed with contempt by his tribe and be rejected at the doors of the war god upon death. This is an order from our superior. This is for our race's dream of returning to our homeland. This is for our justice. Justice, a name used to conceal uncountable vile actions. Under the grand flags often lay the bloodied hands of an executioner. He knew that he was just deceiving himself. However, it was only with this excuse could he deceive his conscience and continued to slaughter. The team is getting more and more silent. Looks like I'll have to look for a way to boost their morale. Only the most depraved villain would brag about their results in slaughtering civilians. From the stiff expression on these knights, it was clear that they had not reached such a point yet. Even so, they did it without complaint. After all, this was war, the evil war, the wonderful war, a war that could conceal all evil with a cloak of divinity. A woo a woo a woo. The howling of the wolves echoed in the distance. That was a report from the Eagle Tribe beastmen, who were serving as scouts. 3 consecutive howls meant that there were enemies in their path, but they weren't strong and the team could simply charge on through. Soon, they crossed a mountainous jungle and the enemy appeared before them. It was a golden-haired young man whose hair was covered with snow. He looked young, but the 2-handed swords in both of his hands were extremely striking. Sigh, yet another young man who had pursued us by himself. Courageous, but naive. He is around the age of my equal. Looking at the young swordsman who was around the age of his own child, Eckerly paused for a moment. Then, he drew his thumb across his throat. It was a command to slaughter all enemies on sight. There were more young men of Iker's age in the previous village. For Iker's beautiful future, you should go and accompany them. That's weird, the sword looks familiar. I seem to have seen it somewhere before. There was no need for superfluous thoughts. Since there was only a single adversary, the Wolf Knights used the wave charge formation which they were the most adept in. The several Wolf Knights whose mounts were the strongest were in charge of engaging the enemy head-on, whereas the strongest, Eckerly, would be leading a team behind to assault the enemy whenever an opportunity arose. Behind them, spears and nets were prepared to be thrown. Even the powerful Griffin Knights could be killed in an instant facing the Wolf Knights. In the eyes of the Knights, the fearless young man was already a dead person. Facing the deadly assault of the Wolf Knights, the young man simply chuckled and a hint of brutality could be sensed from his smile. That familiar smile reminded Eckerly of where he saw the sword. Oh, isn't he the human sculptor from the village? Sword Key? He is a sword saint. That sword? Could that be Roland's sacred sword? Holy Knight Roland? These were the final thoughts that flashed through Eckerly's mind. The snow-white sword flashed across the snow and the flying sword key started to reap the lives of others. A cold sensation on the necks and the Wolf Knight captain felt his vision starting to slant as his head fell onto the snowy ground. The final sight burned into his eyes was the silver chainmail sword saint moving the swords in both of his hands, a single Wolf Knight dying with every single movement of his sword. At this moment, the Wolf Knights were devoid of the strength to resist the enemy. They were like frail chicks who had met a butcher, and what they did half an hour ago in front of that sculpture was occurring to them at this instant. The murderer is often murdered. Such an irony. At the first face-off, the Knights of the Kara tribe lost their head. As a mindless murderer, he no longer had to worry about how he should explain his actions to his own child. Repay blood with blood. Die. Someone shouted these words and very soon, the snowy lands returned to its previous tranquility. It was just that there were additional headless corpses on the lands. Yes, the blood debt must be paid with blood. However, who was the first debtor? Do we start counting from this war, the war 20 years ago, or the war 300 years? This might be something no one could ever rationalize out. After killing the final Wolf Knights, I felt fatigued. So I stabbed the swords into the snow and rested on the battlefield. While waiting, Irene finished cleaning up the escapees. I recalled some things that I could do. From the embrace of the wolf knight, I retrieved a goatskin pouch. As I expected, besides supplies, there was a map of the nearby villages. Those marked with a red cross meant that the wolf knights had already been there, and there was no need for me to head there anymore. All that was in my field of vision were corpses and blood, but somehow, I felt thirsty. So I opened the water pouch the other force left behind and drank from it. It was an absurdly sweet, inferior horse milk wine. Somehow, I spat all of it out. Way, bitter and rough, just like back then. While I complained, Harlois had already interpreted the Wolf Knight's patrol routes. Thus, my next location had been confirmed. Blue Lake Village. Hope that we can make it in time. I do not wish to see ruins again. Thinking of the horrendous state Anwen village was in, I quickened my pace. After cleaning up the battlefield and double-checking that there was no intelligence I had left behind, I hopped onto Arabella's saddle and headed to my next target. This was already the 12th Wolf Knight section I had cleared. Compared to my other companions, I, who was operating as an individual, could be considered to have accomplished the least. Even so, the effects of our results on the entire battlefield was meager. Everyone knew about the theory of huddling together to ward off the cold. Once Sluweer was destroyed, the other northern countries would be next. So the moment the snow started to lighten, the reinforcements of the other countries quickly headed over to aid it. We were the fastest to arrive, but also the least in quantity. 100 undead knights with 300 rookie knights. On the main battlefield where divisions counted by 10,000s, we were probably unable to contribute much. Considering the East Mist's current situation and the beast packs that would assault the country in winter, it was already very surprising that the East Mist was able to send reinforcements. Given how the one leading the army was me, all sorts of excessive gossip and criticisms on the East Mist was silenced. Yeah, at the very least, they were silenced when facing me. Of course, while we had limited quantity, the same could not be said about quality. My undead knights were reliable fighters and those rookie knights were the elites picked out from the newly established divisions. All they lacked was experience. As for me, I wasn't really interested in the main battlefield at Anchuan. The reinforcements of the other countries headed straight for the main fighting force of the beastmen, while on the other hand, I focused on those roaming troops. The guerrilla tactics of the beastmen were effective. In order to clear the roaming troops on their lands, the fief lords of Sluweer Kingdom ignored the orders to provide reinforcements to the capital. As for the other, stronger fief lords, they had been engaged by the other three beastmen army. Light cavalry, consisting of more than wolf knights, hunting in enemy territory wasn't a rare battle tactic, but it was extremely useful when complemented with the elite troops of the beastmen. It was an extremely effective strategy, as well as a brutal one. For an ordinary village, it didn't matter whether the one attacking them was a sword saint or a group of bronze-ranked wolf knights. In any case, the village would be purged. Killing these roaming cavalries was a difficult and ineffective task. Given their mobility, it was difficult to catch up with them. Furthermore, even if one successfully caught up to them, given their top-class individual abilities, it was hard to tell who would win. Before the main army of the beastmen was destroyed, the other countries did not have the power to care about the small villages of another country. Yet I decided to interfere in the affair. Who cares about those nobility? Since we're already here and we have the capability to help them, let's just do it. I do not have many people under me, but the undead knights were capable fighters. They could easily face a section of wolf knights by themselves. At the same time, the rookie knights could also accumulate some fighting experience. Thus, I scattered the group and had an undead knight lead 3 rookie knights in a team to hunt down the roaming light cavalries. Logically but unexpectedly, this kind of operation won the hearts of the people. After all, the fief lords and the royalty who should have been protecting them neglected their jobs, and my undead knights were the best insignia of our identity. Our ancestor Roland had led his army to save the Mist citizens. That fake Emperor Faemer had ignored Emperor Roland's warnings, as well as the plight of the citizens, caring only for his own authority and safety, and holed himself up in the capital. From a certain perspective, the official declaration the Sluweer royalty made beforehand displayed clearly the meaning of foolishness and suicide. I, who magnanimously forgave them, continued with my hunt. My prestige was growing to greater heights every single day. The undead knights began to be welcomed passionately by the villagers, and they felt even more motivated in their jobs. Then, something shocking happened. Famer, upon seeing such a situation, despite Anshuan still being in a desperate situation, warned the civilians through the church that I was making use of this calamity to win the hearts of the people, and reaffirmed that I wasn't their ancestor Roland, just an imitation who was trying to deceive them. Clearly, in the eyes of this emperor, the Beastmen army was an external threat which was going to be expelled sooner or later. On the other hand, my knights and I were the true threat. Hearing that, I almost turned around and left. However, thinking about the matter again, I decided to go all out. Fine, since you said that I'm here to win their hearts, I will win their hearts then. Knights, don our insignia and hoist our flags. We are here, reinforce them. Why should we conceal our identities? The citizens are the citizens while the royalty are the royalty. Should I just watch these villagers die just because of that fool in Anchuan? When word spread, the prestige of the Sluira royalty fell even further. Every day, countless refugees chose to escape to East Mist, a location they would never have chosen to move to in the past. According of my sources, after Famer heard that news, he smashed a century-old family heirloom, a rainbow jade wine cup. After which, he felt intense regret over his moment of folly. After hearing this news, in order to console him, I sent him a message through the church. Rainbow jade wine cup? Isn't that the unintentional product I made from creating glass back then? Don't worry, even though it looks beautiful, it is just normal stained glass, so it isn't worth much. Actually, it isn't a wine cup either. It is actually a feldspatun which I accidentally burned too much. I even placed crickets in it before. There should be a signature to indicate that it was made by Roland on the back of it. If it isn't too fragmented, you can't try looking for it. Alright, based on the rumors, he actually put the cup back together. However, this time, what was shattered wasn't just a wine cup. Chapter 149, Reunion. I wish to become a knight. Even if I am just a wild knight without a family coat of arms, even if I serve as a squire for others for life, even if I am unable to become an official knight for my entire life, it will be fine as long as I can become a knight. For Koan Asta, becoming a true knight had always been his wish. However, it was unfortunate that he wasn't a child of nobility, so it was impossible for him to be sent to an elite knight to learn under him as a squire. He also wasn't a talented warrior who would send teachers into a frenzy fighting over him. He was just an ordinary farmer's child. Needless to say, studying at a knight academy, he wasn't even able to read. Thus, he was never able to take the first step in accomplishing his dream. Thus, he decided to lower his goal and set out to become an ordinary warrior as his goal. However, the result was even more disappointing. Regardless of what close combat class it is, you won't be able to meet the standards if you don't even have basic strength. It would be best for you to return. Unable to even carry the sandbags used for training, unable to carry the wooden spear, exhausted after swinging the wooden sword a few times, it was no wonder that no one was willing to accept him. His physique still remained his fatal flaw among his fellow peers. Even though his conspicuous golden hair and exquisite features made him a popular figure among the young, his weak limbs still made him unsure of himself. Little Cohen felt despair at the fact that even ordinary militias were unwilling to accept him. Even so, he didn't plan to give up. Since I lack talent, I will make up for it with hard work. Thus, Cohen's neighbors would always see him awake early in the morning, running by the river and carrying sandbags. Every day, after he finished his daily duties, he headed to the various stores to help others move their goods. Part of the reason was to earn money, but more than that, he hoped to train himself through such a method to build up his strength. Even though training was extremely tiring, it was effective. At the very least, his pale limbs became slightly more muscular and tanned. Going by the words of the neighbor big sister Lisa, he finally looked masculine. However, his changes were more like evolving from a hamster into a squirrel, fighting prowess increasing from 5 to 6 and not panting the moment he started running. However, what he was unable to carry before, he was still unable to carry. For the time being, it was still impossible for him to swing metal swords. Thus, even though he felt self-satisfaction at his improvement, he was still eliminated from the first round of the selection process for the divisions. After all, the East Mist wasn't wealthy and it couldn't afford to sustain a large army while the civilians were extremely passionate about joining the army. As such, the registration numbers far surpassed the required personnel in the divisions, and this caused the standards to be heightened. Cohen had been too far from the starting line from the very start, and it was impossible for him to become a warrior at all. Even so, he was unwilling to give up. As long as he worked hard to train himself up, the accumulation of his hard work would soon result in a qualitative change for him. However, it was a pity that what awaited him was a series of failure. It is impossible for you to become a knight. Give up. No, I'm not talking about your birthright. The Mist Country has always operated by meritocracy, and there are quite a few farmers who became knights and fief lords. I am speaking about your abilities. If you're unable to even wield a two-handed sword, how can you get on the battlefield? Since you aren't even able to get on the battlefield, how can you be titled a knight? A lord knight who was touched by his efforts intended to accept him as his page, but after conducting some tests, he gave up on the idea. Ayo, isn't this our future lord knight? Hee, nice to meet you, lord. Lord, have you just returned from your patrol? Did you achieve anything? Did you defeat a demon or a beast man? Or did you just triumph over an evil dragon? Ah, how incredible, Cohen. He is our future dragon slaying hero. Ha ha ha. While his usual physical training had received the approval of a few, there were also a few youngsters who found him an eyesore and took this opportunity to mock him. Even so, he persisted. At this point, he probably could no longer remember why he chose to embark on this thorny path from the very start. Was it because he was saved by a group of knights when he was attacked by wild beasts when he was younger? Or was he moved by the stories of his ancestors which he had heard since his childhood? Was it when he saw the victorious homecoming march of the knights? Or was it when he swore to use his both hands to protect his family and friends? There was no path of return, and he did not intend to back out either. Thus, he could only continue persisting. Trust yourself, you can do it. I was also extremely thin and weak when I was younger, but look at how far I came. Right, Prince Roland seems to be intending to create a division. Do you want to give it a try? There were a few who bore expectations from him. Every time Big Brother Clune returned and saw how hard Cohen worked, he would try to encourage him. Right, to Cohen and the others, Clune, who came from the same village as them, was an impressive figure. He was the pride and hope of Dar village. Even though he was young, he was already serving as a part of the Royal Knights. Even though he wasn't an official knight yet, in the eyes of the villagers, it was just a matter of time. It was only that he had recently adopted a cute little girl called Ailey. Despite his tough life, he had somehow just become an unwedded father. This made many young girls cry. Under Big Brother Clune's encouragement, Cohen was even more motivated and worked even harder. However, what came his way was just failure after failure. Until one day when he met a black cat. A black cat that, bizarrely, was capable of speaking the human language. There, he met the turning point of his life. Meow. I found a treasure. To think that he would be an elemental son. Sign a contract with me and become a magical girl. Magical boy. Cohen was first taken aback. Initially, he thought that it was just a joke from one of the spellcasters. In the end, under the verification of Big Brother Clune, he realized that this black cat was actually an incredible figure. She was the beloved pet of Prince Roland, a cat who was capable of casting magic. She actually said that he had outstanding talents in magic and she wanted to groom him to become a mage. Without a doubt, that was an occupation that held even greater potential than a knight, and logically speaking, he should have leapt at the opportunity. But, Lord, I thank you for your appreciation. However, my goal is to become a knight. Perhaps, the route of a spellcaster just isn't one for me. Alright, a bizarre expression immediately appeared on the black cat's face. That look of incomprehension and shock made Cohen worry if he had accidentally offended her. After a brief moment of silence, that black cat continued speaking. Alright, if you want to be a knight, so be it. Let me introduce you to someone. He will Hoodfaltwink. Guide you. From the perspective of a knight, he should be an incredible figure. Yeah, even though he is a complete idiot when it comes to magic. However, I think that he should be a suitable teacher for you. Roland, I found your brother. When I heard those words, I was taken aback. Isn't my brother, Carwins, still in the Chaos Abyss. How could this darned cat meet him? You possess incredible swordsmanship talent, and you are obviously a god-sent warrior. Yet, you chose to become a mage. On the other hand, he, as the elemental son, a person born with incredible talents in magic, chose to become an Iron Can knight. Given how awkward you two are, what else can you two be other than brothers? Alright, that darned cat sure didn't mince her words. Naturally, I took good care of her for that. However, I had confidence in her choice of people. Thus, my interest toward this little friend known as Cohen was piqued, and I arranged for a meeting with him. Prince Roland. Lord Harlois said that you can make me a knight. That fellow was so agitated that he kept trembling before me. Stuttering, he accidentally bit his tongue. Through the system interface, my interest in him deepened. Cohen asked a class: none strength, 5 agility, 7 stamina, 7 intelligence, 14 will, 11 charm, 10 race talent. Elemental Sun system evaluation: for a person with such terrible strength and talent for magic to refuse to become a mage and insisting on becoming a knight instead, he is truly your brother. Race talent: Elemental Sun, do you find the lengthy incantations hard to remember? The complicated magic formulas hard to comprehend? This isn't a problem for the Elemental Sun. They are born with the ability to manipulate elements, and their commands can be used to replace the ineffective magic incantations. They are the favored ones of the world, the illegitimate son of magic and elements, destined to be a great mage. Soon, after some interaction, I roughly understood what was going on. It was no wonder that Harlois said that he was my brother. He wanted to become a melee fighter when he only possessed 5 strength. His talent as a mage had hindered his path as a knight. It was truly rare to see a person with such an awkward personality. After a short moment of interacting with him, I started to grow fond of this slightly shy boy. After all, these days, more and more youngsters were more obsessed with making a fortune, and the number of idiots who persisted for their dreams was lessening. Those who persisted despite seeing no rewards on sight was even rarer. In a certain sense, I am the same awkward obstinate buffalo as he is. Thus, I accepted him in as my 3rd page. Since that's the case, I'll teach some of the necessary lessons for a knight. First, you have to learn how to connect with the world and control your magic power. This isn't a necessary lesson for a knight, but a lesson for a mage. Young man, there's no need to be so anxious. You have to remain humble and learn patiently. Have you never heard of Mage Knight? This is a necessary lesson for an outstanding knight. Ordinary knights wouldn't even get an opportunity to learn such advanced lessons. Right, I have a few close combat classes that are suitable for you. Do you want to give them a try? Putting aside how I managed to guide, hoodwink, this young man afterwards, I am quite contented with the decision I made. After all, given how unqualified the other 2 pages of mine were, this young man was truly of great help. Even though the help he had provided me was on another aspect. Big brother Roland, I have accidentally overcooked the meat. It is a little charred, but my intuition tells me that it will be delicious. Why don't you give it a try? Perhaps this might turn out to be a new taste that is to your liking. No, it was impossible for it to be delicious. After all, one side was charred while the other side was raw. It was a problem of whether it was safe for me to eat it. Besides, your intuition had never been accurate. That's weird. I had strictly followed the proportions using the alchemic recipe. 10 grams of salt, 1 gram of sugar, so how could it taste that bad? I missed that decimal point and added 10 times more salt. I mixed up sugar and salt as well. Why don't you just make do with it? Should I say, as expected of an alchemist? To think that you would actually bring the entire alchemy set for outdoor camping. The lunch you made bore the scent of chemistry with it. But how was it that the product you made would be so fearsome? What is with that oily green substance? Are you sure that I can make do with it? How about you try it for yourself before passing it to me? I finally understand how you managed to remain a third-rate alchemist even after so many years. Can't you just happen to get it right for once? Typically speaking, a knight's page was the personal assistant of the knight. Going by the traditions, a page was responsible for the logistics their master required. If the master was unhappy with their work, regardless of how powerful that page was, he was unlikely to ever become an official knight. Before becoming a knight, they were in a teacher-apprentice relationship, as well as a master-servant relationship. Some of them even regarded it as a father-son relationship. However, it was clear that the 2 pages I had chosen beforehand weren't really reliable. Most of the time, it was me, the master, who was taking care of them. Their passion toward their training was also unseemly. As a princess, Ren had totally no concept of outdoor survival. On the other hand, Kathleen was born from a prestigious family of knights. Even though her family had fallen from grace, it was understandable why she was lacking practical skills. If not for Cohen producing some edible meat stew, I, who was already tired from the long journey, would have to make some food myself. It was truly a wonder who the servant was now. Based on the predetermined grouping, I should have been a single group with my 3 pages. However, Ren said that she had already reached gold rank, and with the Roland sacred sword in her hands, she could stand on her own and deal with the enemies by herself, no longer requiring my guidance. Fine, I'll accept that. After all, it was impossible for one to grow without experiencing practical fights. I'll let you try it for yourself then. In fact, afraid that you might have insufficient manpower, I sent my other 2 pages to follow you, so show me some results. However, one's power rank did not represent one's actual fighting power. In terms of actual power, a tenacious bronze rank was able to frighten this gold rank, who had yet to see blood. On the battlefield, a moment's hesitation could easily mean death. In the end, it went exactly as I expected. If not for the Blood Tribe assassin I sent interjecting at a timely moment, this East Mist princess might have to consider converting into an undead. Last, it's still too early for you to leave my apprenticeship. Thus, we converged together and operated as a team afterwards. With the assistance of my pages, I felt even more fatigued. Not only did I have to hunt those roaming cavalries, I had to spend time to take care of these rookies. I felt like I was playing the role of a teacher and a parent simultaneously. Fortunately, the farmer-born lad, Cohen, wielded a certain level of survival skills. He could build temporary shelters and settle some of the daily necessities. In a way, he was truly a great help. Helpless, I even called out Trent's secret bodyguard, Susanna, and had her find a way to teach these rookies some basic outdoor survival skills. At the very least, they should know how to make the basic barbecued meat stew, and such. After all, it was impossible for one to bring sufficient dry rations for a prolonged wilderness campaign. Meat stew and barbecued meat were 2 of the most basic dishes, but just depending on these 2 would cause one to suffer from imbalanced nutrition, and this would eventually lower fighting prowess. As such, mature adventuring teams were often skilled in outdoor survival techniques. The renowned master of survival Bear Grylls had once said, "The wilderness is my life." The wilderness is the most national outdoor food trove. Anything can be eaten once beheaded. After completing my hunt, I returned to my camp and caught the whiff of a familiar meat stew. Instantly, my appetite was whetted. How fragrant. There seems to be wild herbs and vegetables as well. Susanna sure did well. You all learned fast. To think that your cooking skills would reach such a level so quickly. I was unable to speak further. What entered my vision upon reaching the campsite was a young lady dressed in a maid costume busying about. That was a familiar figure that should have never appeared here. Ding! A wandering wild maid has appeared. Thank the maid from saving you from the mysterious mixture hell. Otherwise, what would have been waiting for you would be a mixture created from Ren and Kathleen's hard work, green slime cooking. As someone who was aware of the matter beforehand, ignoring the nonsense the system came up with, that familiar figure made me feel like I was in a dream. That familiar bow, that familiar gleam of her spectacles, and that unfamiliar passion and temperature. While I was still in a daze, that wild maid had already given me a hug. "Welcome back, master. Do you want to bathe first, eat your breakfast first, or eat me? All right, I don't know whether I can really eat you, but that dagger-like cold glare of yours felt like it was ready to eat me." Elisa? Chapter 150, Secret Big Brother Roland really treats me well. He often tells me bedtime stories and we would spend the night with just each other. As expected of an undeveloped little girl. To think that you're still interested in listening to bedtime stories. Let Big Sister teach you a life lesson. All of those bedtime stories are lies. Princesses are all flower vases who are unable to withstand pressure, and princes were all perverts with fetishes. In fact, there are many such examples around us. Why you are slandering me. However, It is no wonder you are so naive. After all, children have the right to remain ignorant. When I was younger, I often listened to Master's stories as well. I have heard them for around a century now. Oh, should I call him honey now? It does feel a little embarrassing to call him that. There wasn't the slightest bit of embarrassment on Elisa, who was chuckling behind her hands. With just a few words, she managed to infuriate Tren. However, it seemed like I was somehow attacked by her venomous mouth as well. Looks like Elisa must have met Carwins. It is true that he is a pervert. It isn't bizarre for her to come to such a conclusion. Yeah, she definitely isn't referring to me. Shaking my head, I ignored the discussion over there and turned my attention to the feast before me. For numerous reasons, this seemed to be the first time I was eating food made by Elisa personally. After several experiments the last few days, I had no choice but to take my ladle myself. However, I had long since gotten sick of the food I cooked myself. Cohen's cooking skills were also very average. I had been craving for good food recently, and as long as Elisa's food was not bad, I would be extremely satisfied. She had made common meat stew. The meat was cut thinly and there were bits of wild grasses floating on top. An indescribable herb had added to the allure of the stew, and the green onion-like aroma whetted my appetite. Delicious. Even though I had guessed that the cooking skills of the veteran maid Elisa wouldn't be bad, I was still pleasantly surprised by the taste of the meat stew. The stew was thick but smooth, and its aroma tickled my nose as I gulped down the soup. In fact, even after swallowing it, the aftertaste lingered in my mouth, enticing me to take another mouthful. There was also barbecued meat by the side glazed with wild honey and herbs. My stomach immediately grumbled in protest. What kind of herb is this? It must be extremely expensive. Yeah, delicious. I immediately started to dig in. On the other end, Kathleen and Cohen exchanged gazes before digging in as well. From how ravenously they were devouring the food, it seemed like I wasn't the only one tortured by the lack of good food. The most delicious feast I remembered was the one I had before my ascension. However, due to time restraints, Elisa didn't get to make it herself. It was truly too pleasant surprise to taste her handicraft now. Hey, if you don't dig in, we'll be finishing all of it. I have no appetite, Ren said obstinately. However, the moment she said such words, her stomach immediately rumbled. Her face immediately flushed. The most important thing in life is to be happy, and to do so, a satisfied stomach is a priority. Roland, take your time and don't choke. Are you still hungry? If there isn't enough food, I can make a bowl of noodles for you. Thus, I nodded my head in sheer delight. After regaining a physical body, my greatest hobby was eating. As a result, I never turned down anyone with superior cooking skills. How could I possibly turn my head away from such an event? But that very afternoon, I realized there were some things which one should never put into their mouths, especially when it came from a demon who had accumulated a bucket full of resentment behind her cheerful smile. My stomach hurts. My head is also spinning. This is the fourth time my stomach has been acting up today. Elisa, what exactly did you put into the food? The cursed herb, black modala grass. Just as you said, it is an extremely expensive herb, almost equivalent to consuming gold. Right, there's also the little fang dragon meat that I had just procured. This is an extremely nutritious tonic. Ayo, Lord, could it be that your body isn't well nourished? It isn't good to leave your body in such a state. I shall cook another bowl of noodles to stock up on your nutrients. To think that she would use the black modala grass which was used to create poison as green onion. The little fang dragon, otherwise known as little green dragon, was also poisonous. Should I be thankful that I only suffered a stomach ache from the mixture of the two poisonous substance? Something's not right. Why are they alright? Actually, I cleared away the poison in the meat and herbs before using them as ingredients. It must be that there is some kind of stimulant in the noodles which happened to trigger the poison in them. I'm truly sorry, Master. That impassive explanation and emotionless apology sounded like monotonous reciting. Only now did I realize that perhaps, all along, Elisa had been infuriated. I'm sorry, it's my fault. Alright. A true hero knows when to back down. I understood the vindictive nature of this little lass. This likely wouldn't be the end of her vengeance. For the sake of delicious lunch in the future, I apologized immediately even though I didn't know my mistake. Was it because I had been too busy to communicate with her recently? It's all your fault. But since you have apologized, I will accept it then. Elisa finally flashed a sincere smile. Afterward, she threw me a bottle, which after consuming, I felt the chaos in my stomach calming down slightly. There was also another reason why I liked Elisa's personality. Even though she often threw tantrums, as long as I apologized, she would immediately forgive me. If she seemed to be angry in any way, it would definitely be no mistake to take the initiative to apologize in advance. I am finally feeling slightly better. I am a living man. I will really die from that. Please don't come up with those kinds of jokes in the future. Right, why are you here? What's with this physical body of yours? It was truly an unexpected surprise for Elisa to be here. Soon, I managed to grasp what was going on. It turned out that Elisa's physical body was an avatar created using the tributes of the Beastmen. She was barely able to come over through eating a portion of the tributes, so this avatar did not wield much strength. While she had no problems whatsoever with operating day-to-day chores, it was impossible for her to join the battles. Enough. It's already great that you can come. It's not that my nature is working up, rather, I had felt the agony of not having a handy assistant by my side these few days. Now that Elisa was here, I could finally dump all of my work on her. The moment I said those words, the cold-faced Elisa smiled in satisfaction. Then, she came closer and stared at me face to face. I know what you're thinking of. Nevertheless, your words still make me happy. This is your reward. In a certain sense, the demonified Elisa had become braver in expressing her emotions and pursuing her desires. That beautiful face slowly approached mine and the frosty expression that she usually wore disappeared. Below that ice mountain was passion as fiery as the flames of hell. A bright red blush appeared on Elisa's cheeks and her seductive red cheeks were exuding incredible allure and warmth. I had nowhere to back away to. What are you all doing? It was a pity that I wasn't the only one here. Putting aside the other two who were trying their best to pretend to be statues, Ren did not intend to sit on the sidelines and watch this scene unfold before her. She immediately charged between us to tear us apart. Pity? I actually found it a pity. While I was conflicted over my own emotions, a verbal argument had broken out between Elisa and Ren once more. I finally understand why Master hates rascals now. Shouldn't you pretend to be oblivious when you see your parents getting intimate with one another? Parents? Who are you saying are my parents? Furthermore, I am not a rascal. I am 14 years old. I am already of marriageable age. 14 years old? How incredible. I thought you were only 10. Annie seemed to have surpassed you when she was only 10. Alright. Even though her words were without context, based on her downward glance, it was clear what she was referring to. That. Elisa, won't you take damage from your words as well? Alright. Seeing her twisted lips and twitching eyebrows, that venomous flat-chested young lady was currently sacrificing herself to deal damage to the other party. Her heart was probably bleeding at the moment. Just like before, in just a few words, Elisa had managed to destroy Ren. That ineloquent Ren could only march off to a corner and sulk. Even though Elisa was in the midst of angering Ren, her words suddenly echoed through the ring. Master, I have already investigated the source of the bloodline of the new Mist royal family. I'm afraid that this matter is more complicated than we expected. Using your words, it is an incredibly huge scheme, to the extent that I would only be reassured if I came over to say it myself. I have already set up the barrier. Just listen to my words and do not overreact. A formless barrier blocked all curious gazes. I was still squatting by the side and enjoying the glow of the sun whereas Elisa was busy packing the bowls and chopsticks. Unbeknownst to the others, we were currently conversing. First, she is indeed of the Mist bloodline. However, she is not your descendant. Just like you have expected, you are still an old virgin, a powerful elder of the Triple Times F cult, a forbidden spell level archmage, and the spiritual leader of the Torch Festival. The moment I think about the fact that I am the first love of a 1,000-year-old virgin, I can't help but feel agitated. After which, I can't help but instinctively feel slightly disgusted and threatened. It is said that those who restrain themselves for too long become slightly perverted. After 30 years of holding themselves back, they can do anything. As for 300 years, while having salt rubbed in my wound by that venomous tongue, A shocking secret was gradually revealed right before me. I couldn't help but put aside the resentment of the demon. This time, I was truly shocked. It was no wonder that Elisa sent her avatar down despite the costs. It wasn't sufficiently safe for her to use any other means to inform me about the matter unless it was face to face. After a long time, Elisa was done revealing everything. Even though the wind outside was piercingly cold, cold sweat was still flowing down my back. If I remained ignorant of the matter all along, I would have been done for. Looks like I really mustn't underestimate my opponents. While I couldn't help but shudder upon thinking of the possible consequences that could have occurred if Elisa had failed to find out the matter and inform me of it, I still chuckled. Schemes and traps were only fearsome when they were unnoticed. Since I had learned of them, I could come up with plans of my own to counteract them. Thank you, Elisa. Your presence is truly assuring. Looks like I owe you another one. I really can't imagine what I would do without you. HMPH. Seems like you are getting mushier and mushier. If you are truly sincere about your words, you should stop getting involved with other girls. Even though she said so, judging from that sweet smile on the corners of her lips, it seemed like my words weren't completely useless. While we smiling to one another, the pages behind me who were oblivious to our telepathic communication started to quietly discuss me. To suddenly smile lecherously when nothing has happened. Cohen. Could it be that there is still some poison lingering in the body of our teacher? He looks a little foolish and bewitched. I heard from the neighboring Big Brother Clune that men who hold it in for too long will tend to act slightly strange. Seems like Lord Elise's appearance has delighted His Highness so greatly that he was unable to uphold his etiquette. Seems like you would really become a pervert after holding it in for too long. But from the looks of it, it seems like there is completely no hope for Princess Wren. That, Senior Kathleen, Princess Wren is behind you and it seems like she is infuriated. Your Highness, I'm sorry. Surely you won't reduce the amount we have agreed upon. I still need that money to buy a new set of alchemy tools. Even though the opponent is powerful, there is still hope for you. At the very least, there are some aspects where you two are on the same level. Pooh, I really wasn't thinking of that. Anyway, I will try my best to speak well of you before the prince. The apprentices seem to have gotten into a dispute. On the other hand, I needed to reconsider my future moves. The revival of the mist. This is truly a massive and troublesome trap. Looks like I have to quickly end this war. Then, I think I should head to Anshuan next.